Hey everybody, happy Thursday and welcome to another episode of TechStrong TV. Today is Thursday, April 1st. No fooling, guys. It is another new month and I am very excited that spring is here and we are moving forward with the vaccinations and hopefully we are on the upswing and getting past all the bad stuff with this pandemic. So we have a great webinar. Sorry, let me start over.
Okay. You do have a great webinar.
Oh my God. I got webinar in the brain. Okay. All right.
Two.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday and welcome to another TechStrong TV broadcast. Today is Thursday, April 1st. No fooling, guys. We've got a great broadcast for you today, an excellent lineup of interviews, starting with Alan speaking with Ruth Davis, who's the director of the Call for Code program at IBM. If you don't know what Call for Code is, it is a great program in which IBM every year calls for developers to create code that benefits the good, basically, social justice, social economic, and environmental, whatever the topic is for the year. And this year it is climate change, which is the focus. And so the Call for Code program is now underway. So you can always go to Call for Code on the IBM website and take a look at the program itself. But Ruth and Alan talk about what we're looking for in this year's Call for Code Change for Good program. It's a great one. Please definitely check it out. After that, Alan speaks with Peter Barker, who is the EVP and CPO at Fordrock. Fordrock and Google Cloud recently worked with Forrester on a new report about cloud-based IAM. So Peter and Alan discuss some of the findings and what this kind of means for the direction of in identity and access management moving forward. It's a great conversation. After that, Alan speaks with Niraj Tolia and the Danny Allen of Veem. Niraj is the president and general manager, and Danny is the CTO, and they talk about Kasten. Kasten is now part of Veem. They talk about what's going on with Kasten post-acquisition and Veem as well. And we also have some news on DevOps, actually Container Journal today about Kasten by Veem and some of the things they've got going on. So do check out that story as well, in addition to this conversation that Alan has with Niraj and Danny. After that, we have part two of our two-part episode of the Haunted Hacker podcast, which is hosted by Mike Jones, as always. He speaks with Craig Ford, who is the senior security architect at Bidam Solutions, which is in Australia. They talk. He's a great guy. Craig Ford is a very, very knowledgeable person, very, very personable as well. They have a great conversation. Craig's also an author in the cybersecurity space, and so their topics are very wide-ranging on this podcast, and definitely one worth checking out. We ran the first episode on Monday, so if you missed that one, please go back and check out that one before you listen to part two. After that, we have our Something Old segment, and we have a presentation from the recent Predict 2021 Virtual Summit by Patrick Conti and Peter Nikolov. And the topic of their conversation was The Future is Autonomous. And they talk about autonomy and why it will be more prevalent than ever before in the years ahead. They'll be discussing the difference between automation and autonomous, how autonomy is used within infrastructure, and how autonomy will help the world adapt to COVID and post-COVID life. This is a fascinating conversation and presentation, and one I hope you will take the time to check out for sure. After that, I come back with the news headlines as always, and then I have a conversation with Dmitry Petrov, who was the co-founder and CEO of Iterative, and Elle O'Brien, who is the data scientist at Iterative, and we talk about ML Ops, what it is, and so much more. Iterative believes that developers who are already used to their development processes and environments should be able to use those same environments for machine learning and AI use cases. So they discuss how MLOps fits into that equation, and frankly, it makes a whole lot of sense. So I encourage you to check out that interview. After that, I speak with David Scott, who is the Senior Director of Digital Compliance at Veritas. He and I have a discussion about compliance and privacy issues around collaboration tools. We've all been using them over the last year, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. It was basically for so many organizations the only way that they were communicating amongst each other. And no exception here at MediaOps. So, but obviously with the great power comes great responsibility. And so these compliance and privacy issues have become something that organizations do need to take care to avoid moving forward and possibly maybe do a little bit of cleanup on what's happened so far. So great conversation that David and I have about that. After that, I have a webinar preview, as I always do. And then we have Mitch Ashley come on with his Analyst Corner segment. As always, he's provided some great insight into some of the events happening in the IT sector. And today's discussion is no exception. And that's about it. So we've got a great lineup today. So I hope you can stick around, and we are going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Kicking things off today, we have a conversation between Alan and Ruth Davis, who's the director of Call for Code at IBM, talking about this year's Call for Code program, which focuses on climate change. It's a great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another TechStrong TV segment. My guest this segment is Ruth Davis of IBM, and we're going to talk about Call for Code. So Call for Code is a program that's been around now for more than a couple of years, and IBM is one of the major sponsors of it. Ruth is going to tell us more about it. But I wanted to mention, it was something, last year when everything started going down with the COVID and people working from home and we were unsure about, what was going to be. I remember covering the Call for Code. We probably interviewed 3 or 4 different people and times over it. And it was like something we could sink our teeth into, right? Even though it was remote this year, it was going to be different than years before. Here were companies that were doing something for the common good, and obviously the focus shifted right to COVID. But it was like a little piece of normal in this ocean of craziness. And it was a good thing. And of course, we followed it all the way to the eventual winners. But anyway, Ruth Davis, thank you for joining us on TechStrong TV.
Happy to be here, Alan.
Thank you. So Ruth, why don't we start off with maybe your personal background in terms of how you came to be connected with Call for Code. And then, look, not everyone in our audience watches every show, though I don't know why not. Maybe a little background on Call for Code as well.
Absolutely. Well, Alan, I have been with IBM for 36 years. And with the degree, with the degree in electrical engineering, I began my career in systems engineering and continued to focus on solving customer problems in technology, consulting roles, sales. I even held multiple roles in early career professional development. But all along, I've been so passionate about giving back to the community. So I could not be more excited about leading Call for Code as it's going into its 4th year after proven success as the largest and most ambitious tech for good platform that brings together worldwide developers and problem solvers to take on society's most pressing issues. It's an amazing program. Over the past 3 years, the response from the developer community, over 400,000 of them have been engaged developing solutions with us and problem solvers in 179 nations. And just today, I was talking with one of my team, and they were talking about a 17-year-old high school student from Belgium who is coding alongside IBM developers and others in the world on an open early earthquake warning system solution. So that is the value of open source and putting these amazing solutions out into the world for developers to contribute to. It's so exciting.
It is. It's a great program. We kept peeling the onion back a layer last year every time, and the more you peeled back, it was good to the core, right? It was just for a lot of reasons. Ruth, of course, IBM isn't the only sponsor of Call to Code, and I feel like we should mention who the other sponsors are, because they're great companies in their own right.
Absolutely. It was actually created by David Clark Cause, and IBM was the founding technology partner. We also have our charitable partner, the Linux Foundation, which hosts the platform for our winning solutions and other projects, as well as the United Nations Human Rights Office are also the core partners. And then we have a broad ecosystem. Our clients have been engaged with us, Arrow Electronics and Ingram and Intuit. And as we look at our experts around the solution areas that we're working with, and I guess I can mention it now because I'm so excited about our 2021 challenge, which will be around climate change. And
Great.
To that effort, some of the experts that are in this space is Heifer International and Charity Water, as we will be announcing our launch on World Water Day, March 22nd. So this is an exciting ecosystem, and that's what makes the difference in Call for Code. While the solution winners receive a check, they receive funding, that's really the beginning. And we have this infrastructure of ecosystem supporters that then help drive these solutions into the communities. So that is what's so exciting about this.
Absolutely. So first of all, for those of you at home or in the office watching, we did record this before March 22nd, but by the time you watch it, it'll be after. So that International Water Day announcement is already out there. You can check that out. Ruth, that was one of the things that really struck me last year, though, about Call for Code is, unlike so many other awards and programs like this, it doesn't end with the selection of the winner, right? Here's your check. Thank you very much. Let's look at next year's, show. Here, because of IBM's involvement, because of the Linux Foundation's involvement, we take these open source projects and really put them out in the community, but support them in putting them out in the community. So they have a chance to mature, to flourish, to grow, to prosper, and do good, right? Which is kind of the purpose.
Absolutely. And if you think about the 2020, if you may have been following the winner there, Agrily. So they designed an app for rural farmers that they could add weather data and predict the best locations and time of year to plant different crops to optimize that. Particularly these rural farmers that needed access to this type of information. And that has actually been deployed in Mongolia and India and Brazil. And the Agrily team worked with over 500 farmers already, leveraging this tool and impacting their particular farms. So that's the type of deployment effort that we're seeing. And our partners are helping, and the IBM Service Corps is working with them right now to expand that implementation into the various communities, continue to improve and test the technology and the solution. So that's just one example of so many that we are working with.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's a great story, too. I remember the app. Let me ask you another question. One of the things that struck me I've been a judge for various, contests and stuff over the years, and it's hard when someone gets up on the stage and says this was a really hard decision to pick a winner. It is hard when you've got really good contestants. Last year there was some really good finalists in Call for Code. I don't know if you would know, Ruth, but what about the folks who didn't win? Those projects don't fade away, do they? I mean, or do some of them, continue onward?
We do continue to work with those because part of the criteria, as you said, it really is challenging. So many of them are good. We look at the completeness and transferability of the solution, the design and usability. So there are others that have been implemented, and Liquid Prep, for example, is one that optimized the water usage in drought areas. So that one we're continuing to work on. And again, that's the advantage of open source, that we don't drop the continued engagement around those key projects and some of those winners, and some that didn't even in the top 5. We're still working with those and driving those to deployment.
Great. Guys, that's good to hear. Look, Liquid Prep can probably, excuse me, probably has, it has legs for this year too, though I don't know if you could do more than 1 year of entering the contest.
Well, it's
that is
ties
good to
into
hear.
climate change, and again, we are definitely continuing to focus on that.
Absolutely.
And even on World Water Day, you will see that Liquid Prep and its project will be available on the Linux Foundation platform.
Oh, really? All right, that's good. That makes me feel good too. Thanks, Ruth. Thanks for the update on that. So as we mentioned, this year is climate change, and I was talking to my team here at Media Ops actually this morning. So I'm bullish. I'm bullish on the future, right? I think we could almost see the end of the tunnel, the COVID tunnel, right? It's tantalizingly close, but we need to be smart until we get there. But we're going to get there. And once we get there, we have 4 to 7 years of digital transformation that took place in this last year, right? So we're sitting on this well of functionality and technology that we could use to spring forward. At the same time, the Federal Reserve Board says the U.S. economy might grow 6.5% next year or this year, going into next year. That's fantastic, right? We haven't had a year like that in probably my whole lifetime, or near close to it. I think we're poised, for the rest of this decade to be a roaring 20s in terms of economy, in terms of things we could do. But we're also faced with some really big challenges, and probably at the very top of the list is climate change, right? You don't hear many people who whether you want to say it's man-made or not, I never understood that whole argument, but there are people who whatever, right? They think that way. But certainly our climate is changing and it's affecting us. I live here in South Florida. I live it every day. So this is such an important type of topic for us to tackle. I can't wait to see the diversity and the range of projects that are done. But Ruth, for people who are looking out here who say, you know what, I've got an idea around this. I want to get involved in this. Give them a roadmap. Where do they go? What do they do?
All right. Well, the first thing they can do is go to developer.ibm.com/call-for-code, and there will be information about the global challenge and how to get engaged. But I also want to mention that we have framed 3 sub-themes within the global challenge and within climate change. So we're focused on clean water and sanitation, zero hunger, responsible production, and green consumption. So those are the sub-themes that the solutions will be developed, because we worked with our experts such as Heifer International and Charity Water and more to drill down on what areas we thought would have, or they felt based on their expertise and research, would have the biggest impact this year and reach into the communities. So we're excited about that, but we encourage everyone to join us, come to the website. You will learn more. We'll have a session on April 12th that will give you more details about the solution starter kits, and they can begin to build their teams and get ready to contribute wonderful ideas around climate change for this 2021 challenge.
You know what else I love about the challenge, Ruth, is that the contestants, to say they're diverse, it's not just they're diverse in the usual diversity, underrepresented communities. There's that. But they're also diverse in that you've got big companies, public international companies who are putting in, they're throwing their hats into the competition, to like small hackathon teams of people who just give a hoot about something and they're gonna, put their 2 cents on it. And at the end of the day, everybody's judged by how good their project is, not how big their company was.
Exactly.
And it's a really great thing.
Yes, and one other point around that, Alan, is while obviously the coders are going to make it, bring these ideas to life, the teams should be broader than that. They can have any role within the company. They're just a problem solver, someone who understands the impact. That ideation that includes the non-technical parts can really make a difference in helping to frame a fantastic solution. So there's diversity in the types of teams, the size of teams, in the individuals themselves.
Yep. Again, it's not just for developers, right? It's for people. If you're passionate about this, if you can rally your team around this great cause, what a great way of expressing, right, your interest in trying to help here. I think we all want to help solve it. And ultimately, back to my point about, roaring 20s or whatever, is I think we all are ready to go tackle big problems, right? We look at the health science world. We developed a vaccine in a year that was kind of, moonshotty, kind of unheard of. But I think we're ready to start hitting big problems now. Let's get our act together and do it. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a great call to code. Ruth, just if you could lay out broad timelines. We gave a couple of dates for kickoff, right? There's Water Day was on the 22nd, some information. April 12th is another big day. Other kind of, dates that people should be aware of?
Absolutely. So the closing is July 31st. So you'll have all the information that you need to get started on April 12th. And then over those next few months, build those teams, commit to the cause, answer the call. And we will be looking forward to seeing those solutions and judging them later in the year. And as you said, more importantly, help driving those solutions out into the communities with our ecosystem of partners.
Fantastic. The URL one more time in case people might have missed it, where they should go.
Absolutely. developer.ibm.com/call for code.
Excellent. Ruth, before we sign off, anything else we missed or we want to talk about?
Just a reminder that we are so excited to have this launch to be able to contribute to what is such a pressing issue in the world, and join us in this effort and tell your friends and family members, and let's really make a difference in our communities through Call for Code. And there are other projects that are available to work on outside of the challenge as well. We have projects around racial justice as an example. We have a university challenge as well. So all of that information is available on that site. So join us in our efforts.
Love it. Thank you so much, Ruth Davis, for doing this, number one. Number two, for coming on TechStrong TV and sharing with us. I have to gonna hold your feet to the fire a little bit though here. You'll come back on and keep us posted of progress, and maybe bring on some of the teams and show us some of the projects that they've come up with.
I would love to do that. We're so proud of them. Absolutely.
All right, we're going to hold you to that. We're going to hold you to it. All right, Ruth Davis of the Call for Code project at IBM. One of the big do good projects. It's open source and it's everything that you want it to be and good. Thanks for joining us, Ruth. Keep doing what you're doing. Best of luck with this year's Call for Code. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back with our next guest.
All right, next up, we have Alan speaking with Peter Barker, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Product Officer at Fordrock. Fordrock and Google Cloud recently worked with Forrester on a new report about cloud-based identity and access management. Alan and Peter discussed the findings, and there's some really fascinating findings in this report. So let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another TechStrong TV segment. I actually have someone who I did an audio podcast with maybe 2 years ago, returning here for a video segment, so it's great to have him back. Peter Barker of Fordrock. Hey Peter, welcome back, or welcome on TechStrong TV.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Alan. It's been a while, but really enjoy having the conversations with you.
Cool. It's great to have you on. It's great to see you well and safe. So that's always a good thing in today's world. Peter, for those who don't know, Peter is the EVP and Chief Product Officer at Fordrock. Peter, I don't know, Fordrock's a company known to me, certainly, but I don't know how many people in our audience are familiar. So I'm going to ask if you don't mind, why don't we start with a little Fordrock background, maybe a little Peter Barker. I'm almost tempted to say Peter Parker, but no, Peter Barker with a B background, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that Spidey reference. It's just
it always comes up, I guess. Yeah.
Peter Barker. I'm the Chief Product Officer at the company. I've been at the company for a little over 3 years. We've had just an amazing run at Fordrock. We're doing some really amazing things with our customers, solving some really great digital identity challenges. And I'm anxious to share some of that with you. But what we do at Fordrock is we provide modern and comprehensive identity and access management solutions to enable organizations to deliver identity services to their end customers, as well as their workforce employees and identity of things. And we enable those organizations to really deliver exceptional and secure digital identity experiences so that they can deepen their relationships with those end customers, that really build that loyalty and trust and grow the relationship with their customers through digital identity, and also improve the productivity of those workforce employees so they can just get their jobs done faster. And we do this globally for over 1,000 organizations who utilize Fordrock's really rich functionality. We have great functionality in the area of access management, so things like passwordless authentication, fine-grained authorization. We have a modern identity management approach that recognizes the fact that identity is not just about humans anymore. And it's interesting in today's world. The first question you really have to ask is, are you human? You may not actually ask that question, but the system needs to understand that. We have some great identity governance functionality that helps companies govern all of that. We can do things like API security. And then importantly, also, we harmonize all of the identities within an enterprise so that they can really get control of that, both from a security perspective, but really importantly, from an experience perspective. And that's one of the things I'm anxious to talk more about with you today as well. Finally, we really enable our customers to access our technology through a variety of ways. The first is our Fordrock Identity Cloud, which makes this really great, rich functionality available to our customers as a SaaS service. And it's really unique in the industry to have a full, complete identity platform delivered as a service to our customers to really meet those true enterprise requirements that exist out there. In addition to that, and this is something we talked about a while back on a different podcast, we enable our customers to deploy that same great technology via DevOps practices into their environments, like their public cloud environments and what have you. And then finally, if customers want to deploy the software in a traditional manner, we also support that. But what makes that also unique is that we really support this concept of hybrid, the hybrid enterprise, and really having that flexibility to allow customers to deploy or consume the technology that best serves their needs. And I think that aspect of hybrid is really one of the key things that I want to share more with you about, because we recently commissioned some research to cover that.
Excellent. And you know, well, there's a lot there, and I don't want to get us too far down a path here, Peter. But number one, look, as far as I'm concerned, IAM, Identity and Access Management, is the killer app of COVID and post-COVID times for security, right? Because as we have a remote workforce on many, many different ways of accessing, as our apps and data are distributed in containers and microservices and everything going around the world, identity and access management has never been more important. It's not anyone swiping a card when they came in a building anymore, or it's not anyone logging on their desktop. It's you got to take your users and your machines as you find them, and we need that kind of solution. But I'm interested. I'm really interested in your survey findings, because I think, look, we're a year in COVID now, right? This March was a year. We've had enough of a chance to see patterns develop, to beliefs set in, new policies, new processes, new procedures. So let's jump. What do you got, Pete?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're hitting everything spot on there in your comments. I mean, IAM has become language of the business at this stage, right? It used to be something kind of hidden back into IT, and it wasn't really something people understood. I think it's really become a front row conversation about how do you really enable yourself for the digital enterprise. And as you said, COVID has really accelerated the transformation of businesses to digital. And identity is foundational, and it's essential to that transformation. And not only that, you have organizations who are being competed against with digital disruptors. And so all of these factors are really accelerating that need to get this right. So as you said, we did commission a new study in this field of hybrid. And the reason we did this, we partnered with Google Cloud, who's a strategic partner of Fordrock's. We're a premier identity partner of Google's, and we jointly commissioned research with Forrester Consulting to study the hybrid enterprise, hybrid IT, and specifically, what role is IAM playing in that? And we found some pretty interesting things as part of that research. Over 300 people were surveyed in organizations, enterprise organizations that are dealing with this. And what we found, first of all, is that 80% of those organizations are adopting, either have adopted or plan to adopt cloud-based IAM. However, and that's not necessarily a surprising statistic, but 98% of those organizations are struggling with that. The reasons why they're struggling with that is that there's a variety of challenges that really stem from that vastly heterogeneous IT environment that is just growing bigger and bigger every day, and how they can deliver consistent and seamless both experience for their users as well as security in that new expanded world is something that they're really, really wrestling with. And they're dealing with things like, as you said, modern applications, microservices-based applications, but you have a ton of applications that are either being replaced, or they're being modernized, or being refactored, or they're just being straight lifted and shifted. And so there's a ton of legacy there that needs to be brought into the equation. And a lot of cloud-based IAM solutions really wrestle with that. And this is where this concept of hybrid really comes in for us, is because of our flexibility at Fordrock to really match up to that and enable our ability to deploy across this hybrid enterprise. We're able to really meet that need and harmonize the identities and the experience for these companies.
Great. So let's. The survey was taken. The results are in, though, right? So let's, if you don't mind, Peter, what do you boil it down for our audience here? 3 big takeaways from the survey that they should take with them.
Yeah. So the first is that a lot of organizations are wrestling with things like it boils down to people, process, and technology at the end of the day. On the people side, it's 48% of the respondents said that they're wrestling with the necessary expertise to succeed at this equation. And a lot of that has to do with kind of the legacy approach being taken with IAM. And with the modern approach that Fordrock's taking, we're really helping organizations to overcome.
So let me dig in on that, Peter. When we say, so roughly half of the people are wrestling with it. Is it humans who have the ability to do this, or is it tools, or a both?
Yeah, well, I think a big thing is the traditional way in which IAM has been deployed required a hefty amount of skill set within organizations. And now with the cloud and SaaS, we can really take so much of that burden off the customer's shoulders, and it vastly reduces the amount of skill set needed within customers to succeed with this. But at the same time, providing customers a full and complete platform to solve all of their enterprise use cases. And so what it's done is, we're trying to bridge that gap for our customers by just reducing the amount of skill set they just need to even run and operate software, to configure software, et cetera. And so that's one big area that we've really focused on there too. There's another 2/3 or the 2/3 of the respondents said that they're really wrestling with how to integrate with their legacy. And it's because the tooling and the solutions provided by vendors like ourselves is not necessarily helping them get there. And that's something else that we've focused very heavily on with our hybrid solutions, is giving our customers a myriad of ways to integrate into their environments, whether it is everything from legacy applications all the way through to the most modern of architectures. It really helps accelerate that integration for customers overall. And then, finally, it's the technology itself. What customers wrestle with is, how do I continue to stay apace of the security needs, but also continue to advance the digital experience for my users? Because the expectations of users are just getting higher and higher and higher. And often the technology that's been deployed it's not able to adapt and really deliver even better and better experiences. And that's something we focus very heavily on at Fordrock as well, is to solve that problem for customers.
Sure. So Peter, in my mind, there's it's almost a double helix of a problem that issues you need to confront. One is this hybrid issue of cloud, on-prem, right? Multi-cloud, single cloud, on-prem, right? And that is, from a human point of view, how do I get my humans in this hybrid environment, right, and accessing it and everything correctly, safely, securely? But then the second helix is the human versus machine environment. Because I think before COVID and before, Fordrock has been a leader in this space, but there are a lot of companies who had one sort of IAM solution for their humans and one IAM solution for their devices, machines, instances, IoT, whatever you want to call it, right? And they didn't necessarily talk to each other or interact or integrate, and that's old, right? We can't have that anymore. Not in this new post-COVID normal that we're making for ourselves. And I think, when we look at the hybrid, there's the hybrid of on-prem, cloud, multi-cloud, and there's the hybrid of human versus machine.
You're hitting on some excellent points. And if I'll just a couple of examples in that latter category you're describing, the hybrid of machines and humans. Toyota, great customer of Fordrock. if you think about the car experience and driving cars today, of course you have the human driver, you have the machine itself that is, basically a rolling data center these days, right? And there, you have an infotainment system, you have all this telemetry, you have, all kinds of permissions in the car. So, and the drivers vary. You might have the owner of the vehicle. You might have a child driver who's on learner's permit, and you need to understand who the humans are, what the machine is, and how those things come together. The relationship between those two things to deliver an experience that really enhances or enriches how that interaction between the human and the machine work, and deliver at the end of the day just an elevated experience that just sort of really surprises and wows the human at the end of the day. So that's one example. I mean, another BBC, British broadcasting company, is a massive customer of ours in the UK. They do all of the digital broadcasting in the UK. They've had to pivot for the reasons you're talking about. A lot of content has shifted purely to digital channels. For the first time last year, they required all of their subscribers to actually identify themselves and log in order to access content. But that was in a direct aim in order to more personalize and give better recommendations. And so, for example, watching the royal wedding, you had to log in, or if you were watching the World Cup, you had to log in. Well, but that's great because it really enriches the experience for the users. But then how do you sort of take the friction out of that, right? So like if it's a set-top box that somebody is accessing their content from, let's make sure we identify that, but also understand who the person is behind the box that's actually consuming the services. So now you're hitting it spot on. This modern IAM systems, they must understand these concepts and the relationships between them.
Yeah. I'll give you an example on this TV thing you're talking about. So in my house, we have a mishmash. I have a couple of TVs that have Apple TV on them. I have a couple that have Amazon Fire Sticks. I have some that are Roku. And as many of us out here are going through who want to cut the cord or whatever, or maybe not cut the cord, but there's a million streaming apps now, right? Paramount, CBS, Peacock, not to mention Prime and Netflix and HBO Max and Disney and Apple, and the list goes on and on. I wish someone would come up with an app where I log in once for these things and it remembers me. But I do notice on Apple TV the other day, I think it was Showtime or one of the ones, and I went to log into my Showtime app for the first time, and the Apple TV popped up and said, would you like to use your cable company or your TV provider credentials for this? I said, yes.
Yes.
The easiest sign-on I ever had, right? Because it went through, it said, okay, here you go. And, rather than trying to remember my password and all of that, we need, and that, people don't realize that's IAM, right? When it's working right. When it's working right, it makes our life so much easier. It's crazy.
No, you're right. It's sort of, as I was saying earlier, the topic of IAM has really elevated in understanding and consciousness, because just as so many things have gone digital, you start to really see it much more present than maybe ever before. And that example of streaming, I mean, I have the same frustrations as you, but you're exactly right. The earlier days of streaming, you might be entitled to content because you pay a cable provider the monthly bill. You just want to access it a different way on a different piece of glass than the one sitting up hanging on your living room wall.
Yeah.
So you able to do that. The great thing is with IAM, absolutely you can do that now. But you're spot on that those are ways in which IAM can be very smartly deployed to make that experience just so much more intuitive for you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Peter, we're almost out of time. We probably may even be over time. I don't know. But I want to, first of all, thank you for coming on. I know we haven't spoken in a while. Don't wait 2 years to come back on, okay? But secondly, Fordrock.com, of course, is the URL for the company. If they want to get information on this study from Forrester that you guys did with Google Cloud, where can they get that?
Yeah, Fordrock.com. It's right there on the homepage above the fold and the scrolling banner. So it's really easy for folks to just log on there and get access to the report. It's really easy to consume and read. It gets to the point very quickly. And we have a lot of supporting things that go behind that for people who have more interest to learn more. So yeah, and my pleasure to be here today, Alan. It's been too long and really enjoyed these conversations.
All righty, come back on. Peter Barker, CPO, EVP at Fordrock, here on TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we have Niraj Tolia and Danny Allen of Veem, and they speak with Alan about Kasten, which is now part of Veem, giving Alan an update about what's happening with Kasten post-acquisition as well as Veem, and it's a great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another segment for TechStrong TV. I have two guests to introduce you to this segment. First of all, we have Danny Allen. And Danny, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Okay. You know what, Danny, before we introduce Niraj, we might as well, while we have you on, why don't you tell us company and title, a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name is Danny Allen. I'm the CTO and Senior Vice President of Product Strategy here at Veem Software. I've been here for 4 years. It's been a fantastically exciting ride, and even more exciting with the acquisition of Kasten and having them come on board.
Fantastic. And speaking of Kasten, let me introduce you to, and if I mispronounce, I apologize, Niraj Tolia. Yeah? Say it for me correctly, Niraj.
So Niraj is actually, definitely acceptable, but I think the somewhat more phonetically accurate one is Niraj. Right?
Niraj.
You got just fine, but yeah, don't worry about it.
Well, no, I try, and that's all I can do is keep trying. So Niraj, why don't you give us your, excuse me?
I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, everyone should get their name called right? Your parents gave you a name. Niraj, why don't you give us your background?
Sure. So Niraj Tolia, I have been working in storage and data management for a long time. Now part of Veem. I co-founded and was CEO of a startup called Kasten. We got acquired a little less than 6 months ago. It's been an amazing 6 months, and we'll talk some more about that. But we've been doing the startup and big company thing. Previously, I was at EMC, Dell EMC, working on their data protection products, the first generation of cloud products for them. Worked at HP, but at the core of my soul, I'm a technologist at heart. Did my PhD from Carnegie Mellon again on storage systems. So I've been in the space for a while right now.
Got it. Excellent. So let me lay the table out here, and then we'll jump from here. So Kasten was a highly regarded solution in the cloud native Kubernetes storage, data storage space. Niraj, you and I met at KubeCon. I'm going to say the first time wasn't San Diego. I think it was the one before them. Was it Seattle? Or maybe it was Europe.
Time ago, yeah, I think so, right? It's a blur. I've been to most of the KubeCon so far, but yes.
Yeah, might have been Barcelona, but wherever. It was at some big conference, and of course we had followed Kasten. I think our audience is somewhat familiar with Kasten and all of that. Now, about 6 months ago, Veem did acquire Kasten. And Danny, I don't know if we've ever interviewed anyone from Veem here on TechStrong. So why don't you give us a little bit more of a background of what, other than what Kasten does, what else does Veem do?
Sure. So Veem started really in 2007, 2008, right around the time that virtualization was taking off. And we took a very different approach to backup that was based on virtualization. So there's a lot of backup technologies at the time. They're all agent-based. You installed something in the operating system and you would protect the system. And when Veem came out, we said there's a better way of doing that in the virtualization space. And we very quickly became dominant in data protection for VMware. Now, that built us, I'll say, into about a $600 million organization over a period of 8 years. And then about 4 years ago, we said we're going to expand beyond that into cloud and SaaS and cloud native and many different other areas. And so we're known as being backup, doing data protection at scale in very innovative ways.
Excellent. So, Niraj, I have been in my share of acquisitions and mergers. I sold my first company that I started and then went to work to the company I sold it to, where we did 30 acquisitions in 36 months. It's almost one a month, man. We were just, this .com days. And, there's an old saying, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. We broke more than a few eggs in doing those acquisitions. But, generally the attitude was, well, we're just going to leave them alone for the first 4 to 6 months. Right? Let them get their feet under them, used to being part of this new organization, and then we'll see where it goes from there. We'll start the real integration and stuff. But so you're right on that cusp now. You're at that 6 month stage. If you don't mind, share with our audience a little bit. You said you've had a great, exciting time. But what's been going on at Kasten in terms of product, in terms of what we're seeing in market, maybe that our audience isn't aware of?
So, a couple of things, right? Don't have as much experience as you, but this is the fourth acquisition I've been involved in, fourth integration. And I think everyone's been better than the previous one. Mm-hmm. So in this one, now I know what to look for, right? And what to watch out for. But in this case, it's been really good, Alan, from two perspectives, right? One, I didn't want to be left alone, right? Kasten is an independent business entity, so I still manage the group and I report to the CEO. So we still do things in a very fast-paced environment, focused on the Kubernetes customer. But what I was really looking for is, right, Dan introduced Veem, but honestly, when we started, we were trying to figure out how many pages from Veem's playbook could we steal, right? There's a lot of natural synergy. What Veem did for VMs, we did for Kubernetes, right? We software only, care about reliability, ease of use. So all of those things just aligned so well between both parts. I, as soon as we entered, was hungry to say, hey, how do I leverage Veem marketing? How do I integrate with Veem sales? How do I expand the reach of what we can get out there and impact our customers? And all of that has come true. And that's why I say it's been an exciting 6 months. Sure, you figure out how two different teams work, but everyone has been so welcoming and friendly. And Veem, for doing $1 billion in bookings a year, still to me feels like a small company. No one's told me, this is the way it must be, or this is the way we do things. They said, how do we help enable you? How do we figure out something new? So over the course of the last 6 months, we try to figure out how do we keep on being innovative, keep on being the market leader for Kubernetes backup, Kubernetes disaster recovery, but enable Veem sales, enable the field, hooking together with marketing initiatives, and all of that's worked out very well. And we're seeing that just in terms of our results and how well things are going internally when you look at the raw metrics one cares about, new customers, new logos, revenue. All of that is significantly higher than expected because end of the day, right? Veem has done the right thing by giving us the independence to run as quickly as we need, but giving us the support to do something much bigger than we would have been able to do had we been just independent.
Absolutely. So, Danny, I've done a few of these kinds of interviews before, and it's great having you and Niraj on. So, give us your point of view. How has the integration, been going, and maybe what are the plans going forward?
Sure. So, from my point of view, the integration is going very well. I've been through not as many as you as well, but a few of these. My first company was bought by IBM, which was a machine that would suck you into it. Next company I was CTO at was bought by VMware. So I've been through a lot of them. And one of the things I've learned is the importance of keeping that independence, because we want that group to wake up every day thinking about what has made them special. And so, Niraj and his team have certainly done that. They wake up every day thinking about the Kubernetes and cloud native space and how to address that market and the needs. And so we've given them the independence, and just from a financial standpoint, from a technology integration standpoint, from a business standpoint, we couldn't be more thrilled. And the reason for that is the same way that we built $1 billion business as the market was transforming to a virtualized infrastructure. We think the next wave is going to be around cloud native and Kubernetes. So everyone talks about this transformation going from physical to virtual to cloud. I actually think more likely the transformation will be from physical to virtual to cloud native, to Kubernetes-based infrastructures. And so having a team focused on that, building the tools and the capabilities and the cultural approach that matches with that world is imperative to us. So looking out in the future, I say we built $1 billion business on virtualization. I think the next $1 billion, frankly, comes from the seedling, but the fast growing seedling that is Kasten in the cloud native space.
I don't disagree. I was a fan from the first time I interviewed that man. So and it's also an area where, quite frankly, we, look, the cloud native ecosystem, right, is rich and deep. But, where Kasten plays, I mean, within that market, you don't see, I'm not aware of too many other players within there, right? And so when we look at that aspect of cloud native, right, it's funny, I was on a call earlier today with a security company going into cloud native security, and, looking at this ecosystem, what happened before in the VMware days, for instance, Danny, right, and hypervisor times, yeah, you had great tools, but they haven't necessarily translated to Kube and to cloud native. And so we have Kube and cloud native, not versions, but analogs to what you had in hypervisor and even on-prem before that. And these, many of them, like Kasten, are, world beaters within their space, but really just starting to go mainstream, if you will, right? To crossing the chasm into that, bigger market. So, $1 billion might be, in today's world, there's a lot of unicorns out there. $1 billion may be a little on the low side. So where do we see, Niraj, where do we see it going? Where do you see Kasten and as part of the bigger, Veem offering? Where do you see this going?
Two things, right? Where I see Kasten going, or rather Kasten's products going, is to continue to maintain the leadership position we just spoke about, is to continue to be the market leading solution that customers can depend on. Right? And I really do mean it. We have a lot of customer empathy. We do a lot for them. We're driven by them. And how do I help solve their problems is what makes me wake up excited in the morning to get to work. Now, what I see is in terms of, but that said, as you've talked about, right, the world is shifting. We have mixed environments out there. We still have a lot of VMs running, whether you talk about it in the public cloud or on-prem. And customers want systems that can just do the job, no matter what kind of app they might be running, whether it be a managed service like RDS, whether it be a SaaS system, whether it be Kubernetes, whether it be VMs. And bringing all of that holistically together is very exciting for me under the Veem umbrella. So in terms of our strategy is, if you're born in the cloud, if you're cloud native, and that's all you need, we will continue to be available independently to service that market. But if you have a broader need, which most enterprises do today, and it's not just on paper or on the PO that this comes together, but from the tight product integration perspective, how do you get a holistic view on what's happening in your environment? How do you protect the data? How do you safeguard that? Right? That is, again, something that we're actively working on with our customers internally with engineering product to make sure the right solution comes out to market that allows people to get their job done and not worry about things, be able to sleep better at night.
Agreed.
Yeah, I do. And that native independent aspect is so important to us from a strategy perspective. We are inside the marketplace of AWS, of Azure, of GCP. We have native solutions for Office 365, for Oracle RMAN, if you want to go back on legacy. But having an independent experience for those administrators that matches their world is tremendously important to help that business grow. And then one of the things, and so that's foundational to our business. We have these native experiences for the administrators, but we also have a common platform. When we start to ingest that data, we can consolidate the data, and you can do all of the data management to allow the flexibility and movement of data across infrastructures. And so while we have these independent solutions, that common framework for management of data, recovery of data, reuse of data, all of those is common across the Veem platform. And so it's very exciting that the principles on which Kubernetes have emerged are built into Kasten, because it very much aligns with what Veem has done in the past.
Excellent. Well, guys, we're about out of time, but we haven't even mentioned websites. Where can people go get more info on Kasten? Is it over at the Veem website? Is it still Kasten? Niraj?
So you can find them in both places now. Kasten.io has the most information. So if you just go to KASDN.io, you'll see a lot there. But even if you go search for Veem Kubernetes, all the right information will pop out. And if people want to engage, you can always find us on Twitter. We always responsive. We have Slack, Twitter, email, the website, the chat on the website, There are many, many ways to get a hold of us and me personally. So if anyone's watching this and wants to reach out, please feel free to do so.
Excellent. One last question for you. So KubeCon LA in October, they're talking about doing it in person. What do you think?
I am optimistic, personally, I'm an introvert and I miss conferences. And I miss traveling.
Well, I'm an extrovert, and I really miss them. But, hey, I got my second shot yesterday. I'm hoping by October, we can do it.
Yeah, based on current projections, I think we have the possibility of hitting herd immunity in the U.S., at least, where the next KubeCon that you're talking about would be. I think the rate of vaccinations will be high. It'll be available. But as always, you never know in which direction things turn. But your fingers crossed. To seeing everyone in person again.
Well, if you're there, we'll do an interview, if I'm there. All right. Danny, Niraj, thank you for joining us here on TechStrong TV. Continued success with Kasten and Veem. Well, it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. All right. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with our next guest.
All right, welcome back. We've got, and next up, we've got the part 2 of the Haunted Hacker podcast, which is hosted by Mike Jones. Part 1 we ran on Monday, and this conversation is a continuation of one he is having with Craig Ford, who's the Senior Security Architect with Bidon Solutions in Australia. Great conversation. Craig is a really, really personable and well-versed person in the cybersecurity space and an author, so let's give it a listen. It's a great conversation.
But again, like, if people did the basic things correctly, they wouldn't have to worry about any kind of massive breaches or stuff like that. Yeah, it's always going to be a possibility, and it's going to happen. It's not if, it's when. But when you have vulnerabilities that are 5 to 10 years old sitting on your network and you're not patching for it, I have little sympathy for anybody in that situation. But, and the funny thing too is that everybody's first reaction is, let's yank all of our architecture, get that shit out and build it again. And it's like, you're going to build just as bad a network as you did before. So why not just fix what you have first? So I don't know. I'm a little jaded when it comes to patching and IT management and asset management, because as a pen tester over 20 years, I've seen some really bad ideas and bad design.
I kind of agree with you on that, like particularly with your pen testing and your scanning and that sort of stuff. You do a pen test and you come back 12 months later and the same problems are still sitting there, and they haven't patched, they haven't updated, they haven't secured anything different. You just sit there and go, why are we doing this? So you're just ticking the box.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's wasting everyone's time. And I'm a positive guy. I try and see, let's do everything constructive. But when they do that, you just sit there and go, okay, that's just silly. Just don't bother ticking the box at all. It's a waste of time. You're not doing anything. You're not improving. Yeah, and it's frustrating. Yeah.
I have a lot of envy for people and a lot of respect for people who do architectural design and consulting. Because walking to some of these companies, hearing some of the things that I hear when it comes to talking about technology or architecture, like, I just want to get a sock and put a bar of soap in it and swing it at people when they start talking. Because it's like, do you realize what you're doing? When I look at your network and I find 500 WannaCry vulnerabilities sitting on your internal network, but it's okay because it's internal, I want to have a sock in each hand with soap in it. And going out to a site and doing that for a living and giving people advice on how to architect a safer network, a safer environment. Again, you're going to deal with ROI, you're going to deal with the price tags, you're going to deal with the whole program, budget. And that's the part that I think hurts our industry. As I think people really do want to secure things, but I think that numbers and return on investment gets in the way, and always has. So if you look at security in a traditional historic way, a lot of companies didn't want to dump money into security groups from the get-go because they saw no return on investment. And so, I think companies are getting a little bit better at looking at that and saying, okay, there's no return on investment, but if we have a breach, how much are we going to save in recovery and disaster recovery? So I'd be interested to see what kind of crazy stories you have from going in and doing consulting in companies and looking at what they want you to build out, or what, getting advice for you on what to put into the network and what you've seen in their current state. I bet you've got some killer stories.
I've probably got a few. Not all of them I can talk about, but I've definitely got a few. And the thing is, like what you're saying before, is that it's pretty common. You see it a lot where they come in and, it's inside our wall, nothing's getting here. We don't need to protect this stuff. And I'm like, yes, you do. Like, the wall is just the edge. And in systems these days, there is no real wall. There is no real boundary. It's people are everywhere. There's too many different devices. They're in too many different locations. They've got to stop looking at that outside. Let's make the wall nice and hard and do nothing inside it. Yeah, they need to break that whole perception of things. But yeah, you get it all the time. It's like, we just spend all this money, we'll get this nice tech on the outside. But the funny thing about that nice tech is a lot of the time they get it, spend all this money, and then don't really set it up anyway. So it's got the very basic configurations, and they're not doing what they could with those devices or those expensive units that they were designed for. Yes, I still don't think any of them are silver bullets, but if they paid for it, make it work how it's supposed to.
Exactly. Yeah, I always wonder that, like, if you're putting all that money in, because it's in like the hundreds and thousands, I've heard some companies spend to get these fancy solutions put in, and then you don't get a dedicated person to configure it. So it's like, what's the point? I don't understand that. Yeah, I don't understand that. I want to find out why, but everyone I talk to is also surprised.
It's about that whole, I think it is, they bought the solution, and to their board and everything else, they've got this big fancy thing, and they tick that little box saying, yep, we have that now and we're all protected. But like you said, they don't have a person inside that actually knows how to use it, knows how to work it, or even bring in somebody outside that can actually, help them configure it and help them learn how to use it as best as possible. It's just, it's a big, expensive brick sitting over there that doesn't do a lot.
As a pen tester, do you find it challenging when you're doing an engagement at a company to kind of like talk to their IT team? Because I know in some cases, like for us, some IT teams are really great to work with, like they kind of see us as a team. And then we come across some that just hate us. They're like, oh gosh, you're going to tell me what I'm doing wrong about my job. So kind of tell me about, your experience with that relationship with, pen testing and an IT team.
I think you're right. Like I've probably almost a 50-50 split where you sit there and you go like, let's do this. We start to talk to them and start to figure out what the engagement is and everything. And you've got, on one hand, there's some that will work with you and try and do everything and try and help you get the most out of the whole situation. And then you get the other ones that just, like, you're the enemy. They're on the defensive, right? They're always on the defensive. Straight up. And like, the ego's in the way, and you're just like, dude, I'm just trying to help. I think egos is probably the biggest issue with a lot of them. They don't see you as someone that's trying to help. And I always approach that to try and do that direction as, I'm not here to, pull the rug out from underneath you and make you look bad. I want you to get more secure. I want to help you do it. And I will do it as softly as they want me to do it. I'll make sure it's nice and smooth for them and they don't look bad. I'm not there to make anyone look bad. I want to help them. And that's the hard part, is getting those ones with the ego and they just hands off straight away and go, no, I'm not helping you. You're the enemy here. I think, we need to try and get those sort of people out of that road, I think, and bring in the people that are willing to help you solve the solutions. And because that's what we're there for. Like, they're not testing some are just testing for the tick box, but most of them actually want to make their system secure. Like Mike said before, like, people really want to do that. And if we're there, we're helping, we're finding things. And yes, sometimes it's human mistakes, and sometimes, it's oh crap, I did that. Put your hand up, own it, Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. It's all about the education, the lesson, and let's just fix them. We're going to get nowhere, and we're all going to be talking the same stuff again in 12 months if they don't work with us, really.
Exactly. And the culture hasn't changed much since the beginning, the inception of like vulnerability assessments and stuff like that, because, Frenchie just sent me a message, and it's true, because I say this pretty much on every podcast, is nobody wants a pen tester to come into their company and tell them their baby's ugly. Like, go into a maternity ward and tell a mother her baby's ugly and tell me what happens afterwards. That sounds dangerous. Yeah. It's not going to be good.
Sounds dangerous.
So you get the same thing with security. These people spend, in some places, millions of dollars building these networks. And the last thing they want is someone to come in and say, yeah, you're going to have to spend X amount more because you're vulnerable. Your baby's unfortunately ugly. And it happens all the time. And I've even had companies that try to get me to manipulate the findings so that it wouldn't be a finding. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but an admin password and clear text to every server on your network at a hospital is a vulnerability. Like, I can't take that out. But people like that want to fight it because, again, they're looking at facing funding issues, or if they get a bad, report or brief from a pen test, vulnerability assessment, the board looks at it and, it's all metric driven, which is so sad. And that goes back to treating people like people. Is when you have a company that's metric driven and it's metric driven, and you hire into this company walking in knowing that your bonus and your value is based on a metric, that's a problem. Like, it should be work as a team and your value as an individual, not as somebody who does an input on a spreadsheet. But I think that's one of the things too, that once we battle that and change that aspect of the industry, I think security in general will increase because people feel valuable again. Because right now, if you look at the industry as a whole, especially during the pandemic, how many things that we do is starting to be automated or remotely controlled, right? So a lot of the pen testing, a lot of the vulnerability assessment can now be automated and timed. And when you look at like actual producing, exploit code or being that pen tester, and you have to be that human behind the console, that value is still not there, because really what they want is the paperwork, the report that comes out of that tool. That's the most important. And maybe one person per company that can talk to a C-level, which is getting harder and harder to do. Now that we're opening up the ranks to the industry for, anybody with a CEH. But yeah, I think that once people start gaining that passion back and actually we start treating people like people, then we're going to get better security and it'll be a lot quicker. Yeah, I think we still have a ways to go. But I like the optimism that Craig has. I wish I could buy some of that at Walmart, because it would probably help me my interactions day to day. But that's my goal for this year is being more optimistic rather than pessimistic and cynical when it comes to what I know to be true for the industry. And that's the hardest part. You always want things to get better, but it's difficult sometimes when you look at some of these organizations that refuse to change. But that's where we come in, and that's why I like bringing people on the show. Is these are people that are going to be leaders in that space, and that are leaders and can have the ability to influence and change that direction. So that's really important to me, especially like you guys down in Australia. Like, I don't know what it is, but most of our viewers are in Australia. Maybe it's the criminal streak in Australia. I'm not really sure. That's kind of what's been pointed out previously.
Who knows?
Right. Anyway, so do you have any questions for us, Craig? Is there anything that you want to know about as far as our community or what we're doing here or any of that stuff? We're open for questions as well.
No, not really. Like I've been sort of watching you guys a little bit before you sort of invited me to come on. I like the idea of sort of sharing the information and making it an open community. I think the industry itself has been sort of cloaked for too long. I think we need to sort of come out there a little bit more, and we need to talk about things more and show who we are. And I think that's, I love that about the whole community you've got going. And I think, no questions, but I think he's doing a good job, and I reckon it's great. Keep it up.
Awesome. We appreciate it. And you're welcome back anytime you want, whether it's into the Discord server or, you just want to be an extra voice on the podcast. Anytime you're on, I'll co-host you and you can jump right in.
Sounds good.
So anybody have any questions for Craig, go ahead and send it through the chat. The chat will come directly to me, and I'll ask the questions to Craig. So if you have any, fire away.
Craig, when does your new book come out, Foresight?
I've was putting the finishing touches on my last edit this morning when I was waiting to come on. So I'm thinking around sort of mid to end of next month, if everything goes to plan. So the cover and everything's all done, the writing's all done. It's just some final sort of little tweaks and little twitches here. So I think within a month definitely. It's called Foresight. Should be hopefully good.
Awesome. So how much in a ballpark way, how much is it costing to get one of those books published? I'm really curious to, for my own personal reasons.
Yep. With the sort of indie publishing sort of style of things, the most expensive part, apart from time and labor, is probably your cover work. And if you want to pay someone to do the editing, I have a few people that I send it to, and they do a bit of a read through and a bit of a tidy up. So I don't use an official editor. They just give me feedback and tell me what they think, and point out my spelling and grammar mistakes, which strangely as a writer I do a bit. But it's probably the most expensive part is the cover work. Getting someone to design a cover and make something pretty, because I have no skills when it comes to that. I can write, but I definitely don't have any artistic side on that stuff. So, you're looking couple of $1,000, you can do a lot of that sort of stuff, and you're looking probably another sort of same if you want to pay an editor to do the editing for you. But if you do it yourself, it's more time, and it probably takes me almost 12 months a book to get through, sort of in my own time. So we're looking probably 5 to 10 hours a week working on the book. So it is a bit of a time-hungry thing, but if it's a passion, you just go with it, I suppose.
Yeah, that's
what's
pretty
your
cool.
What's your process for writing the book? Do you kind of like do a general outline and then you go in and fill the details, and then you've got like a cast of characters? And do you have any characters that you kill off in this book?
I don't kill anyone off. I think I probably could, but with the fantasy one, I did do a bit of a general rundown. Like I mapped out sort of most of the chapters and put a rough idea of what I wanted to sort of achieve in each of those, and put some main characters and sort of decided on the names and who I was going to bring in and who I wasn't. And I generally followed that, but I still went with my gut as I was writing each chapter and sort of just went with the storyline, and I deviated a little bit and then sort of come back a little bit a few times. But I think that's just part of the writing process. You just got to go with what you feel and then you clean it up later. You can always clean it up later if you go a bit too crazy. But that was general plan, and then just went with it. Went chapter by chapter and just pushed through it. But with my the awareness type ones, there's no real plan. I just will pick the topics I want to write about and just write one at a time and just have some fun when I'm writing each, and decide which ones I keep in there and which ones I don't. There was a few that I dropped out, I didn't keep in the books, but most of them are in there.
That's pretty cool. You should have like I don't know if you remember the books from back in the day, the Choose Your Own Adventure books. Do you remember those?
I like those. Yeah, I like those.
Yeah, like that would actually be kind of a illustrator as well. She's pretty badass with graphics.
So the one done with the nice logos? Yep.
Yeah. Tramy did all of them. She did all the logos for the podcast. Yeah, remember that.
Yeah, let me know what I can do to help. Yeah, I like design, and I really love doing design work for cybersecurity because it's like all these like cool tech graphics and lightings that I don't typically get to do in the corporate world where it's, just boring.
Get to be a bit crazy.
It's more fun. Yeah, be a little bit crazy. I don't ever get to do a logo like the Haunted Hacker logo, and with this kind of brand and theme, where it's a little dark and kind of like, like Matrix glitchy kind of thing. It's fun. I would definitely love to help with any book covers. If you've got any, I won't charge you $1,000. I just do it for funsies.
Okay. Sounds great to me.
Yeah.
So I don't have any other questions. Last call for questions in the chat.
Yeah, I do have one last question for Craig, and it has to do with sharing threat intelligence. So I heard in one of your podcasts that you mentioned that one of the things that you recommend is that, seeing more organizations sharing threat intelligence with each other, because right now, they're very protective of that information, right? So, you don't want to necessarily share threat intelligence with a competitor, but what do you think about, just having industries that are complementary to each other, not competing, sharing information, like a bank and a tech company, for instance?
I think that's a good idea, and I've sort of part of they call it PISN, which is just a group in sort of Brisbane, Australia here, that we sort of just try and sort of get together once every few months and share some what we're doing and what's not working and what's working. And I think you're right. Like, I think if they can at least get that same sort of industries together, and, no one's going to share everything. There's certain stuff that they're going to keep to themselves. But I think if we can all help each other a little bit and at least share those, what isn't working, what is working, get some ideas from other people, I think it's going to be easier for everybody. And we're all, overworked as it is. And I think, anything that can make our lives a little bit easier, I think, is a good idea. I think we're going to sort of be like pulling teeth almost. It's going to be hard to get anyone to really do it, particularly when you're talking about like your managed service providers and your security providers like that. Yeah. Getting them to share that kind of stuff is difficult.
Very difficult,
to say the least. But I think we can do it. I think if we drop the egos a little bit and share what we can, like I said, we can't share everything.
I would love for people to drop egos in the tech world, but
there's so many, isn't there?
But how do you change someone's behavior? It's I don't know if that's something that we can necessarily change, because that's something that person needs self-awareness so that they can change themselves, right?
Punishment.
Punishment. Yeah. I've been very fortunate. I've met a lot of really nice, kind, and passionate people in the industry, but I've also come across people with egos, and I don't know if it's COVID and I'm not going to the office and seeing people and we're doing podcasting, but it's like, I almost don't know how to react or respond when I see someone like with an ego. Like my natural reaction is I just shut down, So yeah, I really, those people with egos out there, please work on it.
Yeah, that's
I think they have to.
Yeah. And I think that's part that's been around IT for a really, really long time. I remember working for internet service provider. We had some of the admins that had been there from the inception of the company, and the ego. Wow, it's like you almost have to ask permission to walk into their space. It's like the value they put on these people was ridiculous. But when you're dealing with an industry that is very infantile, it's very new. People with that level of knowledge were gold mines, hard to find. But yeah, Luke said, send the people with egos to work in tech support. I agree. Completely agree with that.
Humble them out. Yeah.
They will hate that, but good option.
Punishment. So that's, that one last point I wanted to make too, is that article, I read an article that you wrote on CSO Magazine about Five Eyes. I thought that was really interesting and insightful. In a couple...
I got a few raised eyebrows from a few places I consult with, but we won't talk about that.
Yeah, I'm sure. If you want to give just a brief synopsis of what you were talking about in the article to the people who haven't read it, it was really interesting. I found it really interesting. I read it and had to sit back and think for a few minutes, because I've worked for some of those Five Eyes, and the amount of distrust they have just within their own little group is ridiculous. So why don't you go ahead and give a brief synopsis of that, and we'll do a last call for questions, and that'll be it.
From what I remember, it was a little while ago I wrote it, but the general gist of it, I believe, was around particularly the new Australian law that was being brought in at the time about, I suppose you would say the perception was that the government wanted the backdoor into the systems. I don't think that's technically what they were really after. They just wanted a way to be able to legally request information from any of those providers to have that intel or information, or from whatever their target was, whoever it was. And I think that whole concept is probably wrong. I don't think they should have went down that path of, kind of requesting a backdoor from these providers, the applications and stuff like that. I get there's the whole need for some of the, your terrorism and that sort of stuff to get that kind of information in an easier way. But I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think they need to do it a better way. Whether that's powers to, get the information from the person itself, the one that's under arrest or something like that. I think that's still a better way, even though they can't always make them do it. But I think that sort of powers is still better than trying to force providers to give them information into their systems. It's just making them put that backdoor in or something to enable that. And I agree completely with some of those providers where they're just refusing, which I think that's a good thing. I think they need to still stick to their customers. I think, yes, platforms get abused for different reasons, but that's no reason to make everybody insecure and lose everyone's sort of right to do it without any sort of threat of being sort of watched or something like that. So
yeah, and that's been kind of, so when I worked for Verizon, a lot of the U.S. providers are required by federal law to have taps into their systems so that the FBI or Department of Justice can have easy access once they obtain a warrant. But what I found is that those taps were not necessarily being used the way they were supposed to be used. And I think that all goes back to, when Snowden leaked the information he did about X-key score. It's supposed to be based on, certain keywords or certain factors. But we all know that, given access, someone's going to take advantage of that access, whether it be the people who are supposed to be running a program or people who take advantage of the fact that that program exists, right? So yeah, I'm not a big advocate for putting eternal taps, in people's and providers' networks. And that's another thing I talked about previously was security of the provider, right? So internet service providers provide a connection, but they don't provide any protection whatsoever, which they'll tell you that they don't do that. But they also provide on-ramps to online gaming, to all kinds of things that could be used for, violation of any kind of law or even, anti-terrorism acts, right? So you would think that internet service providers would be required to provide some sort of security. And I think if they would step up and actually start looking into that and embracing some of that, maybe the need for an eternal tap in some of these ISPs wouldn't be needed. But even in the US, like the InfraGard, FBI works with only critical infrastructure companies, and they share intelligence and they share bulletins. I was part of the InfraGard for quite a while, but the problem was that the intel was not actionable. I didn't find the data the FBI was giving back to the industry as being actionable. Sometimes they would have ransomware with, they give us a hash to identify the file, but it would be like 10 weeks post deployment, like the hash has already changed by then. But they were really, adamant about getting intel from the different industries. So that's the problem that, reading that CSO Online article made me think about our current structure in the US. And I think the biggest problem we have is, intelligence feeds and intelligence in general is a commodity, right? It's something that we're going to pay for. But a company who doesn't have an intel feed but has, defensive measures and platforms in place to help stop what could possibly be going on, they should probably take all that equipment out and sell it if they're not going to have a threat feed. Because to me, security in a network without a threat feed is pretty much useless. You have to have an idea as to what's going on outside. So hopefully one of these days, Five Eyes and the US will be able to get, that information flowed down to where it's not unidirectional, it's bidirectional. And I think that's the biggest problem with industries. Industry doesn't want to give intel to government because they know they're not getting anything in return. So, it's one of those battles I think we'll be fighting for a while. But then you also have to take consideration that, governments aren't very high on the fact of encryption either. So another battle that we constantly fight and try to maintain. So anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. Really appreciate you coming on, Craig. It was awesome. I look forward to, your next book coming out. And I might ping you later on with some tips and pointers, because eventually I think I'm going to go down that route. Kudos and congratulations for taking that dive and being successful and having books out there that are making some good money. That's awesome. And it's really cool that you get back to the industry like that. Again, welcome anytime. Another great interview. Tremi, any questions? If not, I'm going to wrap it up.
Yeah, no, we're good. Thank you so much for your time, Craig. And I'm really excited for your book, Foresight.
Right? Yes.
Foresight. Yeah. I'm super excited to read it because I've never read any cybersecurity book that isn't, a nonfiction. So
it's going to be awesome.
No worries. It's definitely been fun. I've enjoyed the chat and definitely be back at some point.
Cool. Thanks, Craig. Have a good one.
No worries.
Talk to you guys next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
All right, next up in our Something Old segment, we have a recent Predict 2021 discussion around automation. The future is autonomous by Patrick Conti and Peter Nikolov of Opsani. They walk us through autonomy and why it will be more prevalent, especially in the automotive industry, more than ever before. They're going to be talking about the difference between automation and autonomous, how autonomy is used within infrastructure, and how autonomy will help the world in the COVID and post-COVID life. Great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Conti. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Opsani, and I'm joined today by my good friend and colleague and our co-founder and CTO, Peter Nikolov.
Hi, thank you, Pat. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. I'm really glad to be here, you and I, to have this conversation today, Peter. Today, we're going to talk about autonomy and the importance of autonomy in technology and the marketplace. And, Peter, you're an innovator in data center automation. And I think it'd be really valuable for you to give a little bit about your background in automation, and that'll help lead us into the conversation around autonomy.
Sure. It's actually pretty related to the topic that we have. In the last 16 years or so, I've been building cloud infrastructure and cloud platforms. And those were used by some of the largest enterprises and telecom systems to build their internal cloud platforms and app delivery systems. What is really important in that experience is that we participated, and my co-founder Ross, who we'll talk about a little bit later, have built the systems that are necessary to be able to execute operations and changes in IT systems through APIs, which are things that enable automation and autonomy at a much bigger scale.
Yeah, you mentioned Ross Shivler, your co-founder, also someone that I worked with previously in the industry and in the supercomputing space. And there was a lot about automation in that time. We didn't really talk a lot about autonomy, but Peter, maybe you can give us an example of what's the difference between automation and autonomy, because we really want to get to the value of autonomy here.
All right. Yeah, sure. Automation is an extremely powerful method and an approach. It essentially automates things that humans do that are typically repetitive tasks. So automation is rules-based. It's typically rules that are programmed by humans, things like if this, then that, or in many cases, state machines that have proper response and can deal with changes in their inputs. What is characteristic of automation systems, though, is that they have relatively low number of inputs and outputs, or sensors and actuators, and they are deterministic and static. And what that means is that every time in the same combination of inputs, there is also the same combination of outputs, and also they're static. They don't change over time.
So maybe you could use an example, like I think everybody sort of understands what the modern car is like. What would be an example of automation in sort of our vehicles these days?
Actually, this will be a great source of example, because modern cars have both automation and some of them now have autonomy, so that will be good. Looking at automation in cars, the first thing I would think of is the cruise control. It's a relatively simple system. You set it to maintain a particular speed. It uses inputs like the speed of the car, and it can do only two outputs: either press on the gas to bring the speed back up, or tap on the brakes to slow the car down. So it's programmed to do only very, very small subset of operations that are within a range of expected behaviors. And those are the only things that it can deal with, and it will always deal with them exactly the same way. And of course, if the cruise control is not capable of dealing with, it's expected that the human will just tap off and stop it, and then take over manually. So that, from that standpoint, the cruise control is one example of just an automation system, which is rules-based, static, and deterministic.
And also, I think, from what you and I have talked about before, basically there's a known environment, right? You're typically not, you're dealing with a relatively narrow set of knowns, I think, right?
Correct.
Okay. So then, how does autonomy differ? Just like you said, you sort of gave the components of automation. Maybe you could do that, and then maybe you could also bring it back to the analogy of the car.
Sure. So autonomy goes a lot deeper. Autonomy is typically model-based. It can have a lot more inputs and outputs, a higher number of those kind of independent different sensors. And what is important about it is it's a lot less deterministic. And it still does what you need it to do, but it may do it in different ways. And also what is important about it is constantly learning. So as it learns, its responses to input circumstances can become different and handle the circumstances better.
So, bringing it back to the, sort of the model of the car, what would be autonomy? I mean, where you've got automation being the cruise control, what would be a similar thing around autonomy?
I love that question. Of course, self-driving cars. Don't we all want one? The important thing, the self-driving cars, this would be the example. The full autonomy is a fully autonomous car is a perfect example of this. If you look at the number of sensors, for example, that it has to be able to take into account, those are things like cameras and radars and lidars, rain sensors, wheel sensors. There is a lot of information. Pretty much any system, any sensor that exists in the car feeds into that control system. And then it can control also everything in the car. It obviously can do the gas and the brakes, and it can also turn the steering wheel, for example. So there's a lot more inputs and outputs going on. There's no way humans can program this in a rules-based way to say, okay, well, if you see a deer in front of you, push on the brakes and stop. So the kind of problems that autonomy has to deal with cars, it is a lot bigger. For example, it has to be able to make the difference between a deer on the road and a deer on a sign.
Also, the environment changing too, right? Like the weather could change, or the traffic patterns could change, or things like that. And to have full autonomy, you'd have to be able to, use your GPS for the traffic, and you have to potentially slow things down if it rained, or the traffic slowed, or things like that. Is that along those lines?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the most important thing is it can deal with unforeseen circumstances. It can deal with things for which it hasn't been explicitly programmed, but capturing knowledge from other things that it has done, it can essentially adapt and improve in its kind of behavior and iterations.
So autonomy is really deals with much more complex environments than just automation by itself. So how do you deal with how does autonomy deal with this complexity? How do you pull it off?
Well, autonomy really is enabled by very recent kind of modern technology of machine and approaches in machine learning. It can deal with a lot less structured information, and it learns as it goes. So that's machine learning. Some call it AI, and for simplicity, we'll use the term machine learning for the kind of systems that we're talking about. But the idea is that these systems can deal with a lot more inputs and changes and signals, and can do it faster, and most importantly, better than humans. I think that nobody would have really wanted autonomous cars if they were just as good as humans. Autonomous cars have to be actually a lot better than humans. again, there's some underlying technology there, machine learning, and generally often is categorized in supervised, unsupervised learning, as well as reinforcement learning, for example. And that is kind of a starting point. Most sophisticated systems, including self-driving cars, actually combine one or two or more of these technologies. So let's say they can come with pre-trained models. And for cars, this is based on billions of miles that are actually being driven by test vehicles and have helped build that model and appropriate response. But in addition to this, there's also learning that goes on. So as the car merges, every time it merges into a different lane, it can learn whether it did it well or not well, and then improve its next step. So it's a pretty cool technology.
So then to achieve autonomy, I'm just going to reflect back here. You've got to start with some models, but then the system learns. And to really be able to pull it off, it has to learn at machine speed, not at human speeds, and has to deal with much more complex systems, really at speeds that humans could not. Does that sum it up, or did I get it right?
That's the gist of it. Yep.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, look. Let's bring this forward into some areas that I know a lot of people are wondering about how autonomy fits in. You and Ross founded a company that has built an AI-driven autonomous platform for continuously optimizing cloud applications. Before we sort of talk about what that means, is that what you guys started out to do, or was it something else?
All right. No, just like almost every startup, no, that's not what we started, at least not directly. So the vision, what we wanted to do is to find a right approach for building an autonomous data center. So deal with, we have hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of servers in these larger companies. And there's a lot of activity and management that has to go in them, like resource balancing, failure avoidance, and of course failure prediction and handling. So there's a lot going on that we wanted to use this now APIs through which all of that programmability can be done, so that it can be done by a machine rather than human. So that's where we started.
So just to summarize that, and I know Ross has vision about this because in the previous company he and I worked on together, data center automation was one of the things that we were looking towards as well. But basically, what you guys were looking at was to be able to control everything all the way down to the bare metal, and and all of the networking and all the other things, and be able to create a data center environment that could basically run itself, I think was the objective, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what made you change to focus around the optimizing cloud applications as opposed to the data center itself?
Well, it was customers. It was interaction and contact with customers. As we discussed with customers what we do and what approaches we want to take to their data center, they were really interested, but at the same time they said, you know what, our servers are fine. I mean, first, a lot of our apps are already moving to the cloud, and also it continued to move to the cloud, but also servers are kind of relatively, simple when you compare it to the overall complexity of IT systems. So automation seems to be dealing with them well enough, where customers really, really experience the pain, and they said, well, if you could give me something like that, but for my applications, to manage and orchestrate my applications in an autonomous way, that would be something that we would be really interested in. And as we dug deeper into that, we found that the application layer and the management of applications, it's a much more interesting opportunity and much more challenging for businesses to deal with.
I'm guessing that it also probably had to do with the fact that data centers, in the time frame that you guys were building the company out in the early days, moved from private data centers into public clouds. So you probably didn't have to worry that much about managing the data center anymore. It was really probably the complexity of the app that became the big challenge.
Correct.
So what is the complexity with cloud apps? I mean, what is this problem?
So, I mean, in many ways, working with cloud is simpler than working with in on-premise infrastructure. But that is a model. That is actually an abstraction. That is not true. What interesting thing that happens is that migration of applications to cloud is what actually brought in additional complexity. And there are three main factors that cloud and cloud technology adoption has to increase that complexity and make that problem much more sophisticated and hard to deal with. So the first one is that monolith applications are being split into microservices because it is so easy to stand up another one, which wasn't the case when you were working with a physical server. A lot of projects ended up splitting their application from monolith to microservices. So now instead of one application that you need to manage, you may have hundreds and in some cases thousands of applications. So it's kind of the dimensions. The second thing that changed is microservices enables different teams to work differently and use different languages and so on. So as a result, these applications are now deployed by different teams, and each team kind of may have its own peculiarity, own tools and libraries that they use. So that uniformity is no longer there. And then the third change, which is brought also about by DevOps as an approach to systems management, is the release velocity. Again, in the kind of more traditional pre-cloud environments, products would get released once a year, sometimes at best every 6 months. What we have with today's DevOps is much more rapid. We're talking about weekly releases, and some companies release hourly. So when you combine all these three things, you have three different dimensions that add complexity and variability in the applications.
All right, so customers pulled you in this direction and guided you along this way. What do customers need from the standpoint of optimization, and how does autonomy help deliver this?
Well, the main thing that is a challenge is to essentially keep these applications running through their life cycle, maintain their response time, maintain their operation, maintain them staying together close to each other without interfering with each other, scaling up and down as the needs arise. So essentially, kind of figuring out what the code is the code, and the code really hasn't changed significantly. But what is changing is how these applications are managed and configured and distributed. So
a modern cloud app is a stateless, in many cases, a stateless app, it's going to have many different parameters, different settings and different parts of the application. And so how does a customer use or how do you apply autonomy to this to help that customer keep that optimization, get to optimization and then keep that optimization going?
Yeah. Well, again, the best thing here is that the enabling technology is cloud and the APIs through which a lot of changes can be made programmatically, and which enables both automation, which we have kind of seen built out in the last 10, 15 years of cloud, but nowadays autonomy as well. So those are things like, okay, how much CPU, how much memory, how many replicas of an application, what kind of JVM configuration parameters you need to have. So those are tens and hundreds of different parameters that you may have per application. And then on top of this, with microservices, you have hundreds and thousands of applications. And those applications, because they're changing constantly, those parameters may need to be adjusted in order to make the application work reliably and also at reasonable cost without just throwing too much unnecessary resources at it. So the way this autonomy drives this is by connecting to the various orchestration systems and continuous deployment and monitoring systems to essentially take signals from the application's performance and then affect and improve the application's performance by essentially pushing into the different actuators or the ability to change configuration for that application to maintain it running well.
There are some other optimization solutions on the market today. but most of them will use whatever their underlying science is to create a set of recommendations. And then it's up to the customer to deploy those recommendations or put those settings in place to achieve that service level objective. What's the advantage of autonomy versus that type of an approach?
All right, that's actually an interesting question. If you don't mind, I'll use another car analogy. So when you're talking about recommendations, and there's a lot of, well, I don't know a lot, but there's some systems out there that can give you a recommendation and say, hey, this is what I think your configuration has to be. And then let's see the human decide whether that's what they want to do, when they want to try it, and how to gauge whether this resolved the problem or if this was successful. So if you think about it in the car world, this would be very similar to the GPS navigation. It knows where you want to go, and it tells you turn left here, but it doesn't do the turn for you, and it can't deal with unforeseen circumstances like if there's road construction or a new wall built there, it will just smash you into it. So in recommendations, it in a way, especially for IT, it seems to create more work for the engineers rather than taking things away from them. Where autonomy is important, and I think we'll see a lot more of it in the data center technologies alone, is that it actually takes away toil and kind of unnecessary routine work, but very complex work in many cases. So in that particular case, instead of just saying, okay, well, I think you should add more memory here, or I think you should reduce the instance type to a smaller type here, autonomy will actually implement the change, evaluate it, and either back it out or propose and implement an even better one. So the result of this is that autonomy actually keeps your application running really smoothly and well, without actually creating additional work for you. It makes the changes. It essentially removes this whole layer of configuration management and tuning that you have to do, and you have to do over and over as new releases come out.
So then, if I'm gonna think about applying autonomy into the into the SaaS application environment, it's going to keep all of the different parameters essentially tuned in concert, and so your application is going to always have the best chance to meet the service level objective, no matter what the traffic is, and no matter what other things are happening in the environment and things like that. Is that basically what's happening?
Yes, and that is correct. And the best part here is that, again, just like autonomy in general that we discussed, it can deal with unforeseen circumstances. So, for example, if a flood of new requests comes in that is not characteristic, then an autonomous system will actually be able to compensate for that and handle it.
So using machine learning, you're doing things at machine speed, you're handling probably billions of different combinations of parameters and settings, and you're doing it. You couldn't throw enough engineers at this to do it with human speed. It's got to be done at machine speed. You're just reflecting back on what you said, you're going to get better application performance because you're going to be optimized. You're going to get better scalability because you'll be able to react to changes that might happen in the infrastructure. And you're going to get the most efficient use of the resources because you're always going to be right-sizing what you need to make sure that application stays at the SLO or above the SLO. Are those some of the key things that happen with autonomy?
You summed it up pretty well.
Great. That's fantastic. I have a slightly off book question I'd like to throw at you, Peter, as an expert in this area. How can this powerful technology and approach be used to help with some of the big problems the world's facing today? Like everybody's concerned about coronavirus. Can autonomy, AI, and machine learning be used to help with some of these big problems?
Oh, it definitely is already, and I think it will have a lot more implementations that are based on autonomy and machine learning. So, and that ranges wildly. I mean, if you look at even drug and vaccine developments for COVID, these companies use machine learning, and in some ways, in very similar ways. They can go through millions of different configurations of molecules and proteins and can evaluate them digitally, essentially, through machine learning, and figure out which ones they need to actually try in petri dishes or on people even. So that's a very similar approach where you have different configurations and you can nail down the specific ones that need to be tried, the ones that have the best possibility to be optimal. But that's just scratching the surface. The impact of COVID and the shutdowns around and the lockdowns around it affects the industries in general, not just IT. So when you look at things like supply chain management and ERP systems, there's a lot of variations, a lot of change. There's a lot of volatility that goes on that is very unusual. It is not something that the market or the companies have been adapted to, so they have to change, and they have to change rapidly. And more changes is coming as we now go through the vaccination period, and the industries will, and some of the more like retail industries will start reopening. Everything will be changing, and it will be changing all the time. So again, autonomous systems can help with a lot of different things, starting from ranging from things like traffic control, and also, I mean, last mile delivery systems. When you think about the impact that it had on kind of even the retail industry, you will see a lot of let's say airlines. They don't need as much IT systems because they're operating at lower capacity, so you don't need that much resources. On the other side, things like online payment systems and like delivery services, those are exploding. And again, there will be a transition and a change. So you do want to have the ability to adapt to these changes because, again, your supply chain is not one element. You have multiple different inputs. And autonomy can allow every industry, every company to kind of adjust as the changes occur.
So just to sort of sum up then, and the takeaway here around autonomy is that it's really driven by modern technologies like AI and machine learning, and it's transforming how companies can deliver services through cloud applications and also physically in some cases, and a lot of critical industries can accelerate development of delivery and creation of their goods and services in the current COVID-affected world. So it's IT, it's logistics, and a number of these other areas can use autonomy to help them react to what's happening in the world today.
That is correct. Excellent summary.
Well, Peter, thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun. An excellent, an excellent summary of autonomy and how it's applied to modern problems in IT and some of these other areas. And I appreciate the chance to talk to you about this. And I hope that everybody has gotten something out of this as it relates to how autonomy can be used and maybe how you can use it within your own environments. So we'll say goodbye and thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat, for having me. Goodbye.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. So, April Fools, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon with the Thursday edition of the headlines, and we've got some good ones today. Let's get right in it. First, on DevOps.com, we have an article that shows how organizations can derive value and ROI in DevOps for those 3 Ways of DevOps, which were penned by Gene Kim almost 10 years ago. For those unfamiliar, the 3 ways of DevOps are continuous flow, continuous feedback, and continuous improvement. They are valuable, but they are not a measure of ROI and don't provide insight into what an organization needs to do to improve the return on its DevOps investments. This article looks at what does need to be examined and measured, and even offers up a formula for doing so. Spoiler alert, it's all about testing, from reducing bottlenecks to standardizing and more. And this article connects the dots to show the true importance of testing in the DevOps processes. It's truly an article worth taking the time to read to improve your DevOps ROI. And next we have a piece that revisits no-ops. We haven't really talked about the concept of no-ops on DevOps.com for a while, but there is a contingent of engineers who believe it is the next evolution of application development. Again, if you're unfamiliar with the term, no-ops is defined as the goal of completely automating the deployment, monitoring, and management of applications and the infrastructure on which they run. That is a bold statement. This article features insight from a few folks in the industry on the concept of no-ops and whether it can be implemented successfully, and it's an interesting read regardless of whether you think no-ops is evolutionary or disruptive. All right, in news, the Linux Foundation is now hosting the Async API initiative, which has developed a specification and a suite of open source tools for asynchronous APIs and event-driven architectures. Founding sponsors of the Async API initiative include Ably Realtime, AppyDeck, Bump, IQVIA Technologies, Slack, Solace, and Tibco. Most recently, Postman, which provides API management tools, committed to providing engineering resources to the project. Async API provides a language for describing the interface of event-driven systems, regardless of the underlying technology, and supports the full development cycle of event-driven architecture. That approach helps unify documentation automation and code generation, as well as managing, testing, and monitoring asynchronous APIs. Use of the Async API initiative is already fairly widespread, with Adidas, PayPal, Salesforce, SAP, and Slack all using it in production environments. In fact, it is the fastest growing specification being implemented by developers, with adoption rates in production environments tripling from 2019 to 2020, according to research cited by the Linux Foundation. All right, over on Container Journal, we have an article that looks at whether service mesh is worth it. We've talked a lot about service mesh over the last year, and it's a market that is hot, and getting hotter as more organizations adopt Kubernetes. Service mesh brings a common networking, policy, and observability layer for microservices architectures. But because of its significant overhead, the perception is that it's only relevant for very large-scale enterprise deployments with many teams. But is that truly the case? This article dispels a few common misnomers about service mesh, including whether smaller organizations can benefit from the technology as much as their larger counterparts, and offers some ways in which companies can determine whether service mesh is a good fit for them. And we have news that Kasten by Veem has launched an open source project around a tool to evaluate Kubernetes cluster storage configurations and performance. Kubester enables developers and operators to identify the various storage options present in a given cluster, validate storage configurations, and evaluate storage performance using common benchmarking tools such as FIO. It also extends Kasten for Veem's portfolio of open source storage management tools that include Copia. As the number of stateful applications deployed on Kubernetes clusters steadily increases, its apparent microservices-based applications have varying I/O requirements. Kubester provides a set of tools to analyze those requirements in a way that makes it easier to optimize overall application performance. Over on Security Boulevard, we have an article that looks at how organizations can build immunity at application security insertion points. In other words, bulletproofing their applications during the software development process. The best way to do that, according to this article, is to use continuous testing of applications to identify exploitable vulnerabilities that can pose serious risk in production. Beyond securing the applications themselves, application security is about privacy, trust, and reputation that is directly tied to the brand of those building and publishing the applications. Those business drivers are equally as important as the application itself, so ensuring its integrity should be paramount to developers no matter what size organization. Using an automated AppSec approach with modern tools that integrate with the existing CI/CD pipeline can increase the chances that the culture of AppSec will be welcomed within the organization. And finally, we have an article that looks at how to secure the home branch office. This has been an issue since we were all sent home with our laptops or desktops and told to work remotely until further notice. Organizations have had to deal with securing what has become a spider web of home branch offices all connected to the corporate network. The exponential rise of users at the periphery of the network provides greater opportunity for attack, as the home branch is typically not as secure as a corporate office. When you include the home branch users' access to cloud infrastructure, it further expands that security perimeter. As a result, a number of organizations are looking at SD-WAN, which by its nature offers a higher level of security than traditional networking solutions. The benefits of SD-WAN are many, including intelligent path control and network and application-based routing capabilities, which means data can move faster and more securely to its destination. Some organizations adopted SD-WAN as part of their digital transformation efforts before the onset of COVID-19, but interest and adoption has risen greatly as more organizations recognize the benefits that SD-WAN can bring in not only speed, but also security. All right, that's it for the headlines today. Please check back with me on Monday when I will have a fresh batch for you. Until then, have a great day and please stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon and I am here now with Dmitry Petrov, who is the co-founder and CEO, and Elle O'Brien, who is a data scientist at Iterative. Hey, thank you both for joining me today. Really do appreciate your being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I wonder if, Dmitry, if you could tell me a little bit about Iterative to begin with. I'd love to learn more about your company.
Yeah, Iterative is a startup in Silicon Valley, and we build tools for machine learning. And good portion of our tools are actually open source, and we build like a few tools and kind of make an ecosystem of the tool set for machine learning for MLOps specifically.
Okay, all right. So what is MLOps then? You just mentioned that, and I know I've been hearing so much lately about machine learning and automation and ways that we can improve our processes. And I have heard the term MLOps used here and there sparingly, but it seems like it's growing in popularity. So can you guys kind of walk me through what MLOps is and what it means for organizations?
Absolutely. In organizations today, we have like a variety of different models, machine learning models, right? And MLOps is a way, kind of a discipline, how to use them, efficiently in your processes, in your environment. It's a kind of abstract question. And then there are kind of a lot of details behind this, how exactly to do this and what exactly to use and integrate.
Okay. All right, great. So Elle, as a data scientist, what is your take on MLOps? I mean, how are you seeing organizations using it?
Yeah, so it's data science is kind of in a phase where it's maturing. We've seen a boom in a lot of different tools and approaches, and there's a huge heterogeneity of how data scientists work, and that some of them kind of work in Jupyter notebooks almost exclusively, and everything they make is very much, on their machine and kind of outside of the processes that, the rest of the organization might use related to DevOps, for developing fast, for testing. And data science can tend to be kind of siloed from that. And so a lot of the goal of MLOps is to bring those processes a little bit closer so that data scientists can use the tools that make sense for them, that are most comfortable for them, because data science is very exploratory, it's iterative, you need a high degree of visualization, interaction. But DevOps and automation, you kind of need the antithesis of that. You need things very regimented, standardized, tested frequently, and automated. And so MLOps is kind of trying to find that balance. And so a lot of organizations kind of have their own homemade MLOps, they're all doing it in some way. But kind of our take here is doing some open source tools that might standardize how it's done, maybe take some of the burden off of teams and companies to develop those tools themselves.
Okay. All right. So what advantages then does MLOps bring to organizations, beyond obviously automation and the ability to kind of move faster. Dimitri, why don't I ask you this one first, because obviously your organization is focused on helping organizations adopt MLOps and the technology. So what are when you guys are kind of going out and doing that elevator pitch to folks, what do you say are the biggest benefits that organizations can achieve through MLOps?
First, of course, it's automation, right? MLOps is about automation and how to work faster and more efficient and more predictive way. Mm-hmm. And why we're talking about MLOps today, but not, for example, 3-5 years ago?
Right.
Because 3-5 years ago, the biggest question was how to build a model, how to find data scientists. And today we kind of learn how to do this. There are a lot of students, PhDs, experienced folks on the market, and we have a bunch of models. And now for the industry, the major question is how to be efficient, how to be more predictable, how to be automated. And this is when MLOps came to play. Okay. All right.
Do you guys see the digital transformation efforts that have occurred over the last year or so? Has that been kind of a boon for MLOps? Have you guys seen an uptick in interest in MLOps since the pandemic started and digital transformation kind of went through the roof?
Based on our observation, it started even before the term was used. We started using MLOps term in 2019. Mm-hmm. We kind of, as an industry.
Right.
And the pandemic, of course, it's accelerated everything related to automation. Mm-hmm. And MLOps, it was kind of a boom of MLOps.
So what is it then, and Elle, maybe you can chime in on this one. What is it that obviously that brings so many great benefits to an organization? Why aren't more organizations adopting it now? What has been kind of holding it back until now, or even beyond now?
It depends a lot on the organization, but all organizations have a lot of constraints. My experience was I came up in academic research labs, and there's a huge need for MLOps because there's so many experiments going on, but there's not a lot of pressure to develop things like automated testing or a common model registry. And part of that is because of the model. There's not, incentive to do that. Okay. In organizations, that have a mature DevOps structure, I think data science is kind of hard in part because of data science teams are often they're not part of the same stack. They're not using the same tools. They're kind of separate. And so there's a lot of times where you might have data scientists that are producing great analyses, but then they just really have no way to get them into production because of those people are not onboarded perhaps into the tools that we use, or they don't have tools. How do you take a model and test it in continuous integration? Right. So I suspect that there's some cultural barriers here of those two teams don't play together, and they need to, we need to find conventions. So, it's cultural, but it's also some, standards and conventions so that teams can talk a little bit easier. So there's that. And then I think it might just be, it's difficult to know how do we work with data science? It is maturing kind of before our eyes. So it's finally, I think, at a place where, as Dimitri said, where it's settling down, where now it's starting to get pretty trivially easy to take a model out of the box, make 1,000 models. That's no longer the bottleneck. So part of it is, I don't think we've had to confront this to the same degree, but now that it's so easy to make models, we've really got to keep track of the thousands or hundreds of thousands of models. In a way that we can no longer hack together.
So you guys are really talking about the democratization, if you will, of machine learning and ML ops into, incorporating it more into like the DevOps, software development lifecycle and DevOps tool chain to kind of really bring a level of automation there that just didn't exist before.
One thing I'd add to that is also some independence to data scientists too. Like, to me, one of the biggest kind of blessings of this approach has been, the ability that I might be able to develop something and then I can immediately test that model in a production-like environment and get feedback and know if it fails. So I don't have to be writing somebody and be like, would you please test this for me and let me know how it goes? And then tell me what I need to fix. You can test it yourself. You're not waiting for that manual handoff anymore.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so just to add to this, Elle mentioned that it's important to for data scientists to be responsible for this result. And it's actually like a common trend, right? Today, a lot of activities, DevOps activities, move to development team, right? Even security, right? Dev security ops, it's like security is moving to development team. Now we are saying like, let's do the same with data science. Let's give them more responsibility on what they do, on the direct impact to the business.
So does an organization actually have to have a data scientist be a part of their organization to adopt ML ops, or is it more about having a level of insight and being able to quote unquote automate all the things because of it?
I think of it more as, if you have models, if you've got machine learning models, whether or not they're data scientists making them or engineers, and because it's gotten so much easier to make models, I think a lot of people might be developing models without a high level of data science expertise. They can kind of take a toolkit and say, build me 1,000 models and we're going to pick the best one.
Right.
For better or for worse, more people are doing this with less expertise.
I was not going to say anything.
Yes.
Maybe not.
Of course, I have opinions on this, but this is what's happening. And so anytime you have a space of many models, and you want to be able to test them in production-like environments quickly. You want to be able to audit, know exactly, okay, the model that did go to production, how did we make this? And we want to be able to know this, months later. All of these are situations where you need it, kind of regardless of whether or not you're heavily invested in data science in particular.
Okay. All right. Great. So if an organization is interested in adopting ML ops, what are the kind of the first natural steps for them as they look to either increase the automation that they have, or if they're looking for more kind of overall insight into their processes or anything like that? What advice would you give them if they're looking to add ML ops to their to their tool chain or to their portfolio?
First of all, of course, we need to understand like the processes, right? What part of the processes can be automated, and when you can get the most value from the automation. But there are a few actually small, simple steps how to be more organized in your workflow. For example, the first step might be, let's just start versioning our code, right? In many organizations, it's not the case. They still work on Jupyter notebooks. They're like scattered everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you just need to be like a bit more systematic about this. This is the very first step. The second step, how to work together on the product. If I build model, how I can share this Jupyter notebooks code model with other team members. And those are very simple steps. But when you got to this, through a couple of those steps, your process is already improving. And then you need to understand deeper the process. What exactly needs to be automated when you have problems inside the team or between the teams, when the team spends most of the time. and you go kind of deeper and deeper in this technology stack.
Okay, all right. So the more you know, actually, obviously, the more you know,
Exactly.
the better it's going to work out. All right, great. Well, guys, I do appreciate your taking a couple minutes and walking me through the idea of MLOps and the concept and the process. And I surely hope that more organizations, recognize the value that it can bring to their entire process, especially in the software development space. Automation is always a big thing, and it's a growing part of the conversation for many organizations. So I wish you guys the best of luck. I think this is great technology, and I hope you guys are big successes with it.
Thanks, Charlene. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, everybody, we have got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with David Scott, who is the Senior Director of Digital Compliance at Veritas. David, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Charlene.
Great. So Veritas you guys have been around for a while, but some people may not know about you. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about Veritas.
Sure. Veritas is primarily known for our backup, our data protection products, Net Backup, Backup Exec. Now, I'm on the other side of the business, so I look after archiving, digital compliance, supervision, e-discovery, managing your data and the risk of data.
That's cool. All right. So I imagine that's you've seen a lot of business over the last year or so with the rush to remote work.
Absolutely. It's really changed the dynamic of how people work, and it's brought in all kinds of new challenges.
I can imagine, especially with organizations that haven't traditionally had a remote workforce, and folks who traditionally have not been remote working. I imagine there's a bit of a learning curve there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of our business is with heavily regulated industries. So financial services, public sector, and broker dealers are now communicating with their end customers in different ways. I mean, not just a phone call, but sometimes a Zoom conference, sometimes instant messaging, Teams, as well as communicating with each other as well. And knowledge workers across the world really are embracing Zoom and Teams and new ways of communicating as our days expand, and there almost seems like there's been an onslaught of additional meetings with COVID and with being quarantined and so on. People seem to have more time for meetings. There's a lot more content being created.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I can attest to that for sure. So it seems like my entire life is on Zoom now. I can't seem to get away from it. But for a lot of people, to your point, the fact that there are so many meetings, we really have not had a deep discussion about what this incredible increase in online meetings and use of collaboration tools, what it means from a compliance perspective. And I can imagine, especially, as I said, for those organizations that really were not used to remote work before, I imagine we've seen some compliance issues crop up here and there. So maybe you can tell me what you guys have seen and what is maybe kind of the biggest issue that a lot of organizations are dealing with these days.
Okay, well, I think the big thing is the shift to video conference. And I mean, not that it's a new thing, but it's just so much more prevalent than it was ever was before. And it's replaced the in-person meetings during COVID. As a result, I mean, the technology's gotten a lot better. Like one of the big improvements in the last year has been, you now get a transcript of your call. Whether you're like with Teams, you can have that real-time transcript as you're talking. You can see the words being spoken. Zoom captures a transcript at the end of every meeting. Now, those transcripts to the average knowledge worker, that's kind of cool. Like you've now got a artifact of every meeting that you can search against. As a knowledge worker myself, I mean, that's appealing.
Yeah.
My memory's not as good as it used to be, so it's great to have a repository to search against. But the flip side of that is every comment gets recorded. And you can think of a few examples where someone said something stupid in a meeting and it caused, like, think of the Uber CEO, I think it was. And now every meeting across the entire organization has the potential to be captured and easily searchable. So what does that mean for e-discovery? Well, that's another artifact you might need to have awareness of, to be able to search against. Maybe you want to turn off the transcript capability just for that reason because of the legal risk. There might be HR violations in those meetings. You might, as you shift from formal email communication to more off-the-cuff communication and virtual meetings, people aren't as careful of what they say.
Yeah, I can see that, and especially if you have traditionally corresponded mostly via email. I mean, you could spend an hour crafting an email, but once you say something, it's out there. So
that's right.
You can't take it back. As much as sometimes I kind of wish we could take it back, but that's another story for another time. But it also brings up, I would imagine, issues regarding privacy. As I just said, once it's out there, you can't take it back. So are you seeing that organizations are grappling with issues of privacy, kind of keeping the confidential HR information private, or even HIPAA, meeting the HIPAA, regulations, keeping the health insurance or health information secure and safe and private?
Absolutely. That is a big challenge. I mean, it's as simple as something where you are sharing your desktop and you inadvertently share the spreadsheet that was up with everyone's salary, like things like that. GDPR and data privacy regulations around the world, where you have to be very careful about what's shared. There's different levels of that. Like you don't want to share personal information, credit cards, that sort of thing. And then there's also the highly sensitive content, sexual orientation, political affiliation. Some of those sorts of things can leak into informal communications, especially in the year of an election last year. Coupled with COVID, you're going to get some political discussion potentially. And as a company under regulations like GDPR, you're not allowed to save that content. And the convenience of instant messaging, the convenience of texting, the convenience of video chat, and now with this idea of transcribing some of that content, you have to be a little more careful. And what we found in the survey is that people haven't quite adjusted to that level of scrutiny. They don't necessarily know that can be monitored and that can persist, that content. And for that reason, they're maybe not being as careful as they should be.
Okay, so you referenced a survey that you guys recently did. So tell us a little bit about that survey.
Well, the idea of it was just to get a sense of how things are changing as communication vehicles change. At Veritas, we capture over 100 different content sources, and we capture it for discovery, supervision. We capture it for just preservation of intellectual property. But the main thing we do is we surface the content that's relevant for discovery cases, for litigation, Freedom of Information Act requests, and to make sure that you comply with whatever regulations you need to comply with. And so we did the survey just to see if people were making that adjustment. Like in the early days, okay, I'm 51. I was around when email was introduced to our company years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And in the early days, people weren't very careful. You had inappropriate jokes, you had, that type of thing. I think we're better aware about some of those things, but the survey found that people are maybe not, we haven't completely evolved, I guess, is what I'd say. And different vehicles, different communication vehicles have different standards.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's a sad kind of point of fact that maybe we haven't evolved as much as we should have. But at the same time, I think there are so many people who just aren't really aware, and they don't really think about the implications of saying something in person, face to face, versus in person via Zoom, where there could be any number of other people listening and hearing or reading the transcript or something like that. So do you think that the technology, these collaboration tools such as Zoom, Microsoft Meetings, Teams, all that good stuff, do you think that they're going to kind of evolve their platforms as well to better enable folks to adhere to regulatory compliance, and other things?
I think so. I mean, it's amazing how far it's come. I mentioned that the team's capability to do instant, basically closed captioning of the conversation, which is incredibly helpful as you're dealing with maybe different accents, different quality of microphones and things like that. That's pretty amazing that they can do in real time closed captioning. Right. Now, what if they could do real-time filtering where there's a 3-second delay and they could, detect that something inappropriate is about to be said? I don't know. There's probably ways they can get there. Another part of the equation is, what can you learn from the fact that you've got a close-up of someone's face and you can analyze their audio? Are they lying to you? Mm-hmm. Are they interested in what you have to say? There's all these other big brother type stuff they can bring into it. And I think how valuable that might be if you're a sales rep trying to make a sale. Is this customer into the product, interested in the product or not? Mm-hmm. So there's all this extra metadata you can layer on top once you have a face and a voice. And, it's not just about the text they're saying, but how they're saying it.
Yeah. I think actually hadn't really thought about that, but that's a really, really interesting point. What do you think? How do you think people will, take to something like that? I mean, for me, that seems almost like, even though it is so similar to a face-to-face in-person interaction, doing it via Zoom to me almost seems like an invasion of my privacy.
Sure.
It's the same thing, but now we've got a machine reading me instead of a person reading my facial, gestures and recognizing whether I'm, interested or not interested in buying somebody's product. So especially since all of that can be captured now and held for later. And it also kind of extends the conversation. If you've got my facial features and gestures now recorded somewhere, what does that mean for, say, deepfake technology? You can take that, and that actually could be used against you in the future. So are we tripping over a very fine line here when it comes to personal privacy and how much data actually about us should be shared and including our facial features and I don't know. You're blowing my mind here. I can't even think about this.
Maybe I'm going a little too far out there, but it's interesting. I mean, these are probably bigger problems even outside of video conversations and that the technology around, reading into what you're seeing and that is it becoming far more advanced. I saw a technology recently where it looked at Lance Armstrong testifying around steroid use and just identifying that he was lying most of the time.
Wow.
Some of that stuff is, and these are emerging technologies, but I think that the important thing is that what we learned from the survey was that people have not made the leap yet that this is the same as email. This is the same as any corporate communication, and you do have to be careful. And it does persist. And I guess another nuance of it is that having the transcript devoid from the original, when you see words written on a page, they may come across very differently. Sarcasm is lost, and things like that if you don't have the voice inflection and that sort of thing. So there's that aspect of it as well. And people are really gaining trust for instant messaging and sharing widely a lot of content. And now when you get into sharing during a Teams conversation, it may be an internal team, it may be an external team. You may forget the difference. You may forget everybody that's on the call, and you may share a document you shouldn't. There's things like that more getting back to kind of where we are today. Those are the types of things that we're seeing, that people are still very open to sharing almost anything via instant messaging.
So do you think as we move toward this more fully remote workforce or a hybrid workforce, sometimes in the office, sometimes at home, do you think that we'll have the higher level of attention that needs to be paid with everybody in the organization understanding exactly what's acceptable, what's not acceptable to share over a collaboration tool such as Zoom?
I think it'll be a slow turning, just like it was with email. Because I remember the early 90s where, again, no one really had this idea that this was a company record, a company, that you had to be careful of what you shared. And people were very open with, again, inappropriate jokes and that type of thing, and just junk email. But I do think it will come. I think that already on the more formal platforms like Teams and Zoom, as that becomes a corporate standard, there'll be a lot more training around what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, and companies will have to make decisions around whether they do want to, keep the artifact after the meeting. Do you want to keep the video for a long period of time? Do you want to keep the transcript? Do you want to even generate a transcript? And the legal ramifications of that. As long as it exists, it just needs to be discoverable. And do you want to go down that path, or do you want to just simply get rid of it at the end of the call?
Okay. So do you have any kind of best practices for organizations to consider when they are using these collaboration tools, and maybe whether something should be recorded and archived, or whether it's just not worth the bandwidth?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there's some simple steps. First of all, it's good to standardize on a platform and understand that platform and lock it down to the level that you need to. And I'll give you an example of that. Like Microsoft Teams, first of all, you have the transcript ability. Maybe you don't want that. Lock that off. Turn that feature off. Another feature we get a lot of comments on is whiteboarding. Do you want to have a whiteboard? Do you want to, so again, in the context of a broker-dealer conversation, you want to avoid anything that's improper, insider trading, overhyping a stock, things like that. There's been some instances of someone holding up a whiteboard or using the whiteboard technology within a Teams chat because that's not captured. And so there's all kinds of shady ways to get around, even if you're transcribing the call, that wouldn't show up, but they could hold up something, they could use the whiteboard. So turn off the features of the platform that you don't need or you can't control, like the whiteboard feature in Teams. Look at technologies that can help cover those gaps. We are working on an ability to capture whiteboards, and even to look at OCRing images in a conversation. That's something that's future for us, but something that we need to, we're looking into. So like, in other words, if I held up a piece of paper saying, buy this stock, it will triple in 3 weeks or something like that, we'd be able to look at a sample and pick that image up, OCR it to text, and be able to find it. So there's, in terms of best practices, lock down what you don't need and standardize as much as possible.
All right. Well, David, thank you so much for walking me through it. And if folks want to take a look at the survey, is it available on the Veritas website?
It is, yes. It is available online, and we can pass the link on to you.
All right, great. Well, thanks, David. I appreciate your time and the information that you've shared with us today. It's definitely something worth thinking about for sure. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. As I always tell you, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Here are 3 that are coming up very soon in the hopes that you'll be able to check your calendar, mark your calendar, and join me for them. The first one is called The State of Infrastructure as Code Security, an expert panel live stream. This one is happening Tuesday, April 6th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is sponsored by Sneak, CloudBees, and Red Hat. The adoption of infrastructure as code and configuration as code is soaring with the rising popularity of technologies such as Kubernetes and Terraform. But that means that designing and deploying infrastructure is now a developer task, even if your developer is an infrastructure architect. And just like application code, configurations can use test-driven methodologies to automate security prior to deployment. So in this webinar, experts on automated software delivery and Kubernetes will share their recent findings from an infrastructure of code survey and discuss some of the security best practices along the way. Topics of the discussion will include security testing throughout the CI pipeline, misconfiguration trends, and IAC remediation patterns, plus a whole lot more. It's going to be an interesting webinar for sure. The second webinar I want to let you know about is also happening Tuesday, April 6th. This one is happening at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is called Monitor Your Migration to GCP with Datadog. In this webinar, we will focus on the Google Cloud Platform and discuss some of the ins and outs of a cloud migration. Also highlight some common pitfalls and some deployment scenarios. Then we'll also take a look at how the Datadog technology can help organizations plan, execute, monitor, and troubleshoot their cloud migration, regardless of the complexity. So some of the highlights of this webinar will include different deployment scenarios with Google Cloud Platform and how Datadog helps organizations monitor all of them on one unified platform. Datadog's enhanced observability for Kubernetes, and how organizations can gain better insight into their GKE environment. And lastly, how a unified observability platform enables organizations to migrate or deploy across multiple platforms with confidence. Good stuff there. All right, the final webinar I want to let you know about is happening Wednesday, April 7th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is called Release Me, how release management is getting into the DevOps flow. This one is sponsored by Fordrock. Release management has been a stabilizing force in software development and delivery, bringing together disparate information to ensure release success by managing scope and coordinating release activities. But as batch sizes become smaller and automation increases in DevOps, release management needs to adapt. Release management still plays a critical role in DevOps, but it requires new priorities to stay relevant. So in this webinar, we'll focus on what is currently wrong with release management and why it needs to evolve to meet the needs of DevOps. Great stuff there. All right, that's it for today's webinars preview. I will be back on Monday with a whole new batch for you. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Please stay safe.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, next up is Mitch Ashley in his Analyst Corner segment, giving us his views of the world on IT and always insightful stuff he's got to bring to the table. So let's give it a listen.
And welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. I was talking with someone recently about the idea of compression, that a lot of what we've experienced is not only acceleration over the last 12 plus months, like the advancement to the cloud, digital transformation projects, all kinds of things. But also we've compressed a lot of our activities, and we now have expectations either created by ourselves or necessarily needs of the business that are asking us to compress not only time frames, but the ability to solve problems, to be able to connect the dots between business need, business opportunity, maybe crisis or other kind of situation we have to take action on relatively quickly, maybe very quickly, and our ability to respond to that. And that compression is solvable in a couple of ways. We can solve that by doing things that we've done before. We have tools, we have software, we have platforms, we have capabilities that we've already have in place, we have experience with. Sometimes that works. At times that can also not work, because sometimes those existing processes and technologies aren't necessarily prepared to accept, something that changes so fast, where the expectation is, I need this in, less than a quarter. I'm talking about a month or two rather than a quarter to 6 months or beyond, right? If we're able to respond that way. Another option is to look at other things you've done and say, well, can we do more of that? So let's say, for example, if we're doing a low code, no code kind of applications in the business unit, or we're doing some of those things with professional developers in IT, that may be a platform of choice or platform to expand and grow upon and be able to respond to whatever that compressed response needs to be. And what we're really doing then is asking ourselves not only to use that to solve another problem, but potentially to expand its use greatly. Because once you identify that either a new tool, which would be your third option, bringing something else in, which is oftentimes difficult to do unless you already have some experience with it. So oftentimes you're sort of in that middle ground of, well, we're doing more of this, and that's what we want to build on for the future. We didn't necessarily plan on it happening this quickly, just like we didn't plan on choosing Slack or Team in 3 days instead of, a few months or longer to decide what the best collaboration tool is. That those are the kinds of opportunities where tools and technology stacks that can deliver value quickly and connect the dot between business need, urgent, whatever it is, to demonstrating as some or all of a solution to that problem, that opportunity. That doesn't negate what we have. Doesn't mean we don't have good things in terms of our current software stack. Maybe our software teams are very good at microservices and add enhancements and create new capabilities because of the software architecture and because of our ability to create and deliver software through DevOps and automation and Agile, things like that. But it also creates new opportunities for other technologies to come on the scene. And often those are the things that go viral, right? It isn't the one app that gets built in whatever your low code, no code platform of choice is. It's the next 10 that get built because the first one was so successful or relatively successful for given the need and the situation. So I think as we think about our strategy for technology is how do we compress what we're doing and be able to respond quickly with results quickly in a way that we want to scale from that point forward. And that doesn't mean drawing a fence around a moat or a big wall around what we have and saying, well, this is how we do it, so you got to do it our way or no way, because guess what? The business will go find another way. If the need is great enough, they'll find a way. I mean, we will find a way, right? And so thinking about our technology strategy, and that may be the time to really say this is why and justify why you're going to ramp up on DevOps and container, cloud native kind of architecture. You're going to go from kind of citizen development of applications to professional development, but it's still low code platform. And it's not necessarily in a cloud native or other kinds of ways. Or we're going to solve integration between applications in a more cohesive, better managed way than we have in the past. I remember those enterprise system architecture diagrams that look like a bunch of really small TVs with all lines connected between them, almost like a spaghetti document and spaghetti diagram that is just And every one of those lines represents not one thing, but several dozens of things happening between those applications. It's just a bit much to consume because that's how complex it really is. So my point being platforms that can help us with integration. The reason why I talk about all this is it isn't because one technology is right or one thing is the merging and it's the thing of the future. It may be so, but I keep coming into this intersection of cloud native applications, our legacy that are no longer legacy applications, but we need to propel and move them into the future and bring them into how we create software with DevOps and Agile and tool chains and pipelines, and workflow pipelines and CI/CD, things like that, as well as how we incorporate as part of our strategy, let's say more either business-friendly platforms or low-code platforms that professional developers would use that can help them with integration problems. And that platform may be from one vendor, it may be a combination of solutions for security for this, data for that, building code and writing my apps, deploying mobile apps this way, which, by the way, it kind of amazes me now that we almost say, oh, by the way, I need a mobile app with this too. It's not just a website. I need a mobile app and a watch app and a whatever, and I need to be on all these platforms. And we say that so cavalierly, like it's an easy thing. In some ways, it's become a lot easier to do than it maybe was 5 or 6 or 10 years ago or whatever. But that's the environment we're in. We're in this entire electronic digital world, and we want to interact. We want our customers to interact with us on lots of different platforms, in many cases. So the environment's become, that much more. To me, it's exciting. It's fun because those are very interesting technologies, and they can solve wonderful problems in unique ways that can bring great engagement and value to our customers. So hope this idea of compression is one that makes sense, and thinking about the range of technologies and how they can all work more cohesively, easy for me to say, as part of your strategy for technology. So I wish you the best. I hope you're having a good 2021 and hopeful and exciting times ahead. Take care.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, everybody, that wraps up another TechStrong TV broadcast. As I said before, no fooling in this episode. We had a lot of great conversations. I hope you enjoyed them as much as I did. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new broadcast for you. Until then, please try not to become the butt of an April Fool's joke, and have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.